da da da. Ya da 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 da. Oh, good lord. Yeah, this is gonna be... Oh, this is a very, very big topic. Don't worry, Alex. You can do this. It's a big topic, but you can manage it. Let's check. Are you going live? Streaming? Hopefully. Okay, it is working. It is working. Right then. It's working. It's working. It's alive! It's alive! Powder Monkey is finally connected up. Woohoo! It's alive! I tell you, it's alive! Bam, 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 bam. Questions should now be open. And a bump. So, is this working? I think it is. Oh, it seems to be working. Hello everyone, how are we doing? So, two things. One, I have to apologise quickly. The reason I have to apologise is you might notice videos haven't gone live this week. That's because we've had a garage door which I identified as a lawn ornament rather than a garage door. A bathroom which I identified as... it felt an affinity with infinity pools, what can I say? And issues on top of that as well. So basically there have been things I've been dealing with. Also, so I apologise. Those videos are going to do, the Friday video is going to happen, the Tuesday video is going to come out next Tuesday, and then the next Tuesday when it's going to come out Wednesday and that sort of thing. So it's all going to happen. It's just been a bit of a nightmare, and I do apologise. So hello everyone. Also, it's been that interesting a week that I am treating myself. And just make sure you can all enjoy with me. And also, quickly while I start, you might be noticing something new is appearing on YouTube called shows. Apparently, we can group our videos into TV-style series. I'm not sure. I'm having a go with brew ships. We'll see what happens. That's happened. And I've also managed to turn on another new thing which YouTube has created, which is called GIFs. I have no idea how that works. That's entirely from your side. So, shows I have set up, and hopefully it follows that you can watch one episode and then takes you automatically to the next episode, in correct order. We'll hope for that, so being set up correctly. GIFs, I have no idea, but I did have to basically prove I was me to set it up. So I had to present my passport and all sorts of things to Google. That's a good time. Hello, Glynn. And yes, it didn't start for you until it refreshed. That's just cruel of it. But with that being said, so when this all takes place, and it is kind of fun when it does take place, it's taking place in a scenario whereby, sorry, for some reason my screen has gone weird. Oh, joy of joys. Discord is OBS is being fun. Oh, this is going to cause me worry this evening. There we go, done. And it's now happy. So, World War One, what people often forget is that Gallipoli actually starts off quite early in World War One. World War One begins in July 1914. The Dardanelles campaign starts to take place in February 1915. So, we're literally talking about war, the invasion, Gallipoli, decisions taking place in about the first 6 months of war, if not less. We're also talking about the fact that there are hostilities with the Ottoman fleet beginning as early as October 1914. That's the way it goes. It is a war which is already setting down. One of the troubles is that, okay, a lot of the armies had still been training on Napoleonic imperial doctrine. Imperial doctrine is usually you have a significant technological advantage over your opponent, which you can use to basically dominate them. When we consider, definitely have a logistical advantage usually over your opponent in imperial doctrine. In Napoleonic warfare, it was manoeuvring corps which, charged up and down and hadn't really changed by when you got to Crimea and various other things, those sort of wars. It was solid. It was solid. And whilst people had watched the American Civil War, there was, how do I put this politely, a gross negligence when it comes to studies of the war from the point of view of the armies. One of the interesting things if you look at the American Civil War and its impact on European technology and European martial affairs, is that whilst there are a lot of European army officers who go and serve in various parts of the Union Army and even the Confederate Army, the information they bring back and how they are approached and how they are considered is inversely proportional to what campaigns they were actually in. The ones who were actually working with Grant and under his command mostly didn't get much attention and most listening to. The ones who were under, the guy who basically sat in New Orleans for most of the war, and a few other like that, who had massive staffs of European officers and all sorts of uniforms adorning their command structures, they got a lot of study. They're not really that useful, let's be honest. They're not really that good at campaigns. They'd have been better if they'd been with Old Rosie. But they weren't. So, that was, of course, the problem. Added to that, navies have a reality which they have to deal with when it comes to technology. They don't have a choice to whether they can take part or not. They don't have a fun thing of, well, how do I put this politely? We can pretend it doesn't exist. Because it's kind of like, if you consider how turbines happen and the spaces of turbines being implemented. What happens? There's a naval review and a vessel with a turbine called Turbina, which was the first vessel to be fitted with, to be sort of fitted and running with one, as we would understand it. basically toodles up and down at high speed around the Royal Navy's fleet review in front of everyone. So the Royal Navy is sort of going, well, if we'd wanted to to ignore turbines, we can't now, can we? Thank you, Mr. Parsons. You sod. It's the same with artillery. Yeah, we'd love to ignore the increases in range and accuracy of artillery. We'd love to ignore it. We can't because everyone else is blooming using it, aren't they? Because naval warfare is artillery warfare. Sods. We'd like to ignore submarines. The trouble is they have them, and so do we. For armies, the fact is, as long as they had the technological advantage over for their imperial duties, they really didn't have to pay much attention to it. They really didn't. And this is World War One. Everyone has lots of interesting plans. They hadn't even... let's not even get into the Russo-Japanese War and the various announcements over that one. There was often ideas that the Russian military was a third-rate military and the Japanese was a second-rate military, and therefore you couldn't really study them. Again, it's the Russo-Japanese War. A lot of study and a lot of information is taken from the Naval War. People tried to ignore the Land War. Okay? This is one of the interesting things. Because if you look at it, the reputation in history, and the way it's sometimes talked about, whilst you do have the whole lions led by donkeys thing for World War One, the rule is normally generals are considered the thrusting technologists and admirals are the conservative ones. But admirals are the ones who are constantly adapting to new technology and implementing it. Generals are the ones who ignore, and then jump on it and become its prophets, as a rule. And that probably explains that in the entire historical remembrance of it, because the admirals are always adopting technology, which means they have usually a more realistic idea of whether a technology is viable yet or not. I.e., it's a coming technology, but it's not yet arrived. It's something which is going to be a weapon system. It is going to be here as a weapon system. There is no one doubting that. It isn't it yet. Whereas for the army officers, it's ignore. The world hasn't changed. Wow, it's changed! And the example I tend to use this for modern warfare is if you look at radios and radio communications. And the classic thing is, look at how many generations of radio systems most navies' boats have gone through in the same time as as the generations of radios which the land vehicles of the army have gone through. It's a really interesting thing. Once you start doing that, go and do it and analyse. How often do they change the radio systems on ships' boats versus how often do they change the radio systems fitted in a Land Rover or Humvee? And that tells you a lot of what you need to know on the subject. Yes, you can go, well, hang on. The Army's has many more such radios than the Navy does. And you go, yeah. But let's be honest, both sets of vehicles we're talking about are basically their light wandering around vehicles. But one of them changes the radios fairly regularly because it needs to keep them up to date to work with everything. And that gives you the example. One is a constant change in the evolution of technology. One isn't. They changed the radios and Land Rovers. Yeah, there is when I was originally told this, I did look into it, and there was quite literally a good 30-year period where the radios in Land Rover basically seemed to stay exactly the same, and no one did any modifications to them at all. And in that time, the Royal Navy boats went for about 6 different generations of radio. It was quite disturbing. It's a fun time. So the point which I'm trying to make with this is the war period, the beginning period, is not going to change. Historically, It's gonna be the lockdown in France. It's gonna be that's happened. You're probably still gonna have the issues in the Dardanelles. You're probably still gonna have issues with the Ottoman Empire. But the thing is, what you descend down there is going to be interesting. Do you depend upon the French and the Italians to block up the Goeben and the Breslau? Now, please note, we'll be talking about this as we go on, but, historically, the British may actually take some battle cruisers down there. They take they take Queen Elizabeth down there. They literally take HMS Queen Elizabeth down there on her own to be the flagship. But her other job is, if the Goeben tries to come out and interfere with anything, kill her. And let's be honest, anyone here in this chat think, you know what, Goeben stands a chance against HMS Queen Elizabeth in World War One. I mean, she must have a chance. Anyone want to rate Goeben's chances in that scenario? Narrow confined waters, no room for manoeuvre, and against Queen Elizabeth. Hello, Juniska. March Agnes. Technically, the Gatling gun is to a machine gun, one as an auto-gyro is to a helicopter. The end result is similar, but means are different. Then a man introduced a Gatling gun to a machine gun. Let's put it this way. Mark Agnes, that was one of the most productive dates ever known to mankind, when someone basically presented a Valentine's card from a Gatling gun to a machine gun. Michael Cooch, stop doing yourself down. But no. So basically, the war has got down into its solid state. It's not going to move much for the next 3 years. Okay? Basically, there are going to be pushes backwards and forwards, but things are going to stay fairly solid for the next 3 or so years. The Baltic plan, the wonderful idea from Fisher, was to use 600 vessels, including things like the Courageous class, etc., which we built, which would force their way through these straits. Now, I want you to think about this, because, yeah, sometimes they're known as the Danish Straits, not the Denmark Straits, the Danish Straits. And Øresund, Storbalt, and Lillebælt, there are technically 3. On this map, they look kind of even. In reality, you're probably aiming for Øresund and Storbalt. You're aiming for those 2. That one is really not going to be fun. And technically, they are Danish territory. Okay? They are Danish. Not German, Danish. Now, is it going to be easy? No. That's one of the reasons why he's looking at why Fisher is proposing things like shallow draft vessels like Courageous and Glorious and Furious to push their way through Lillebælt, to basically push through and actually, go through in all 3 directions. He's talking about needing 600 plus vessels. Okay? It is not going to be a small fleet. He's talking about going through, landing a British force in Pomerania. Yeah, Pomerania. Here. And the reason he wants to land there is because it's also a place where he can land troops, he feels, and once he's secured a beachhead, can get reinforcements from Russia as well, and suddenly you can have a whole British-Russian land force charging towards Berlin. Joe Fredericks, this is our Tannenberg, that we are talking through the plan. Not what would happen here. We're talking through the plan. As Fisher was proposing. Now, I have, yes, put it in, I think it was Fisher's own phrase, but one of the things is I haven't referenced that because I'm remembering it's Fisher's phrase, but I cannot find the book where I read it in. But the idea was they would descend on Pomerania, which was barely defended, and from there advance through undefended territory, take Berlin, and be using the Kaiser's own bathtub within a couple of weeks. That was the idea. I'm glad to see there are many in the chat who are going, this plan would not work. Now, the thing is, this is Fisher's plan. And there is a different scenario, there is a scenario we'll be talking about when this gets in, because there is a problem for Fisher in implementing this plan. And this is one of the scenarios which is interesting. When you consider Gallipoli, and we'll talk about that in a second, and the officers who are involved in implementing that, they are a lot more junior than the officers who will be involved in implementing this. In simple terms, you can boss and politic the officers around in Gallipoli a lot more than you will be able to involve to the officers involved in this. Now, the thing is, I do want to note a small smidgen for you all. If it was done quick enough, considering the intelligence advantage the British have, the way the Royal Navy is basically forming up in the top of Scotland, far away from anywhere, would come in from Scotland, would come tear through the North Sea, and could pick which would suit them for doing it, and could charge their way through, there is a chance they do it. Because the thing is, the Germans can stop them as long as they stop them in those straits. The moment the Royal Navy is through the straits in enough strength, the Germans are going to be in trouble. Because as we talked about before, we talked about Jutland, we talked about German torpedo boats, and this is why this thing's actually the year of the destroyer. The German torpedo boats, which are built to give them an offensive punch, are actually quite weak at doing the screening of the fleet in a defensive action. And in this scenario, there is no room to maneuver. You are going to end up with the screens fighting each other. And that is going to lend itself to the British screen, which has both more destroyers than the Germans have torpedo boats, and they are larger on average than their German counterparts, and heavier armed than their German counterparts. Still very much within destroyer-grade gunnery, but the British ships their counterpart are more numerous, bigger, better armed. Because the British ones are built for North Atlantic, North Sea, the German ones are built for Baltic, North Sea, and they are torpedo boats, not destroyers. And I realise there are some German destroyers, but we're talking about on averages. We're not talking about individual classes here. An individual class of 12 or so ships is not going to have an impact. This is a battle where we're going to be talking about destroyers engaging each other in the order of hundreds of ships. So, I'm sorry, you might be able to go, but the Germans had this class, which is equal to the British, and it's going to be, yeah, there's 12 of them, there's 60 on the British side. It isn't going to matter on the averages. And then you've got all the cruiser differential numbers. And again, The Battle of Jutland is a classic example of this. I've talked about this. There's a whole video on this channel called The Fleets of Jutland, Building the Fleets of Jutland, which is all about the fleets that actually engage in Jutland. And people tend to look at the dreadnoughts fighting each other, the ships, and go, "Well, yeah, the Germans have done well matching up against the British. They've got within spitting distance, they can say of them, and they're close." And then go down the rest of the fleet. Cruisers. The German cruiser force is basically non-existent in comparison to the Royal Navy cruisers. You go to the destroyers versus torpedo boats. Again, there is a decisive numerical advantage. It would have been made even worse if the Harwich force had been able to engage, which would have just overwhelmed the German counterpart. Because the Germans, to build the capital ships and not go over their funding limitations and therefore not start competing for money with the army, had to limit themselves. So they hadn't built cruisers and they hadn't built big destroyers or enough destroyers, and that had been their sort of their hamstringing. You know, they had been held up because of that. Again, it's a perfectly rational decision. You are making an international race, you're doing a competition, the competition is dreadnought numbers. So you're not building a rounded fleet. The British had enough capacity and enough funding, they could do the competition and still build a rounded fleet. So, this is the scenario where it is potentially possible. However, and I'm going to be emphasizing this as we go through, this plan is absolutely nuts. Because if I was the Germans, what I would do is actually let the British fleet pass, go out and attack the UK. And that's a big problem for Fisher. You've got to figure out a way to block the Kiel Canal, to block the naval ports as well at the same time. And Sadu's reminding people that the British still lost shipyards due to lack of work. Yeah. Oh, Runon's wearing her platform shoes. Sorry. For those who don't know, one of the admins just dropped into the chat and has said, "Fear me, for I have been finally elevated to the height that I long deserved." Platform shoes. We'll be talking about this as we go on, but a Fisher's plan as it existed, the French were not part of it. Now, the thing is, this is all a question of leadership, and you have Fisher, who is... Look, I would argue Fisher doesn't even think he needs to do the actual amphibious operation. I think he breaks into the Baltic. He blockades the Germans' Baltic coast. And suddenly Germany's going to collapse. I think he thinks if he can do that, he thinks he's going to scare the Germans enough by threatening their Baltic coast that they will immediately sue for peace the moment the British break in. I think that's his gamble. Because let's be honest, Fisher is a gambler with deterrence. He likes to gamble on a deterrent operation. He likes to gamble on an operation which is going to work on multiple levels. Yes, does it matter? If it wins, what does it get you? Now, the other person you have involved in this, and this is the trouble, is the naval forces are really... The Prime Minister at the time is concentrating on Europe. He's concentrating on the land, and he's basically presuming Fisher and Churchill have got the sea. Right? It makes sense, let's be honest. He's got a First Lord of the Admiralty who is absolutely obsessed with naval power, and he's got a First Sea Lord who is the Admiral of the Fleet, the Lord Fisher. There is literally no one more senior, more powerful, more prestigious in British naval warfare at this time. Joel Fredericks, I just talked about the destroyers versus the torpedo boats. There's going to be a massive screening battle. Already discussed that. So, that was a couple of minutes ago we talked that through. Just watching the chat going on, and it's always fun when things come in, and you sort of going to go, we talked about that one. Now, the thing is, the reason you have Gallipoli is because Churchill is always searching for a soft underbelly. He always believes there is a soft underbelly. He always believes there is somewhere where you can attack which is weak, which will collapse, and then you can achieve a glorious victory. Italy is the soft underbelly as far as he's concerned in World War II. In this period, why not go after the sick man of Europe, the Ottoman Empire? It's been being propped up for years. You're already fighting it. You're already skirmishing with it because of the Goeben and the Breslau and the situation they've got going on there. You've already got issues. And the thing is, he wants to push in. And you go, okay, that's fine. That's what you want to push in. You want to push in. We can understand you. And so he's got Fisher going, let's do an amphibious operation. It's going to deliver this. But Churchill is smart enough looking at the situation going, that's a hell of a throw of the dice, man. That is an absolutely massive throw of the dice. If that goes wrong, we lose the fleet inside the Baltic, and the Germans win this war. And to him, that goes, well, hang on, I know what we can do then. We can attack. We can attack Turkey. We can do the same thing, because the Dardanelles is threat, but Dardanelles is Ottoman Empire. They're weak. We can go and attack them, and then we can supply Russia, which after the Battle of Tannenberg, etc., really needed the resupply, and we can keep Russia in the war, and we will win, because we'll be supplying the oil, which will keep the Russian steamroller rolling, and it will roll all the way to Berlin. And the thing is, both plans are about assisting the Russian steamroller. One is basically helping them get over the bump that is Hindenburg's army, and one of them is about basically giving them the fuel, giving them the supplies, the food, everything they need through their, let's be honest, the Black Sea are their warmest ports, and most successful ports. So, it makes sense. It makes sense. The soft underbelly of Britain, by these standards, is always Ireland. It's always Ireland. When the discussions, whenever they're talking about them, whenever they're looking for the soft underbelly of Britain, everyone always ends up invading Ireland. I've done a video about the time they decided Wales was the option. It did not go well for them. The French army in question met the Welshwomen. They got defeated by the Welshwomen. They didn't make it home. The ladies of Wales were not keen on the Frenchmen. They broke them. They broke their army. They broke them individually. They broke them as a group. It was a battle which was not glorious for anyone other than the ladies of Wales. And so, yeah, this is the reality we're talking about, is these two leaders are looking at this and they're discussing, and they are trying to figure out how to solve the problem. They're also, I would argue, trying to figure out how to shift the axis of control of the war, the strategic control of the war, from the War Office to the Admiralty. If they could do this sort of operation, then they suddenly get a massive win for the Admiralty, and the Admiralty gets to start being far more influential in this war. Because at the moment, World War One is starting to look like a continental land war, which is exactly what the War Office has been building up for years. All their reforms, everything around has been around that, and that's what they've been focusing on. So, you know, this is about domestic politics, international politics, perceptions of nations, and two people who have egos. And historically, these two completely fall out over Gallipoli. But they also managed to bungle the orders for Gallipoli dramatically between them. Because they keep pushing the Navy to go before the Army's there. And the Navy are also given orders not to take too many casualties. Which is why, even though there is a chance the Navy was actually... Roebuck gets very close to pushing through. It's very, very close to pushing through. It's about 1 or 2 strings of mines left to go, and he would have been through and would have been able to go on to Constantinople. And possibly would have been able to do the fait accompli like they do in certain computer games. And, yeah. But they didn't. Because of the way the orders were given. You see, at first they don't wait for the army. And then when they know the army's on the way, they tell the Navy to still try and risk doing it solo, and still forcing Fort solo. But, you know, not to push it too hard, because don't worry, the army is on the way. We're talking about that, though, when we get to the Gallipoli slide. There's also force allocation and command. The first officer to be in charge is Vice Admiral Sir Sackville Hamilton Carden, this gentleman over there. He is a capable officer. He really is. He is a capable officer. He is not constitutionally created for this kind of commando. Forcing forts. You know, we talk about it in British history. It's nothing they haven't done before. Copenhagen is a good example. They did it twice. And both times they took tremendous losses. They are glorious victories, but they took losses doing it. Ships forcing their way past land installations has never been cheap. And there is always this new shock of people going, oh, good God, there's a threat of land-based missiles to ships. It's terrible. We might lose ships to it. It has ever been so. Ships get in range of land-based artillery. They take casualties. It's an artillery duel. The race is to see who wipes out whose artillery first. It always has been that way. It will probably always be that way. Even when we're talking about spaceships, there's going to be planetary defenses. And if you get in, it's going to be a duel between who wipes out who first. Again, it has always been this way. I'm sorry. Now, there is a Rear Admiral Sir John de Roebuck, who's the second in command. And he's also a guy who's going to be featuring in next week's video now about Royal Navy destroyers in the pre-World War I period. Because he'd been a senior destroyerman of the Royal Navy. And he had basically forced through quite a few changes while he was in the Med Fleet under Jackie Fisher. And he is a trusted, aggressive pair of hands. But if he is ordered to not take too many excessive casualties, he will not take excessive casualties. But he is a Rear Admiral. And the Chief of Staff is Roger Keyes. So are these A, B team, B team, or C team? To answer Michael Cooch's questions, they are a mixture of A and B team. And Carden is probably a solid B team, but he's not the man for taking casualties. Okay? And there is a scenario, you know, it's a slightly different scenario. There's a casualties in a fleet battle where you're engaging, where you're able to parry and engage and parry and engage. There is taking casualties, driving your forces through the enemy. Literally. We're talking about taking casualties, driving a battle line of pre-dreadnoughts, that's Royal Sovereign-style battleships, through minefields, through fortifications, as slowly grinding them down, taking losses, pushing forward, taking losses, pushing forward, taking losses, pushing forward. It is not a scenario where you can maneuver. It is not a position of skill. It is not a position of battle of honor where you have a parry. No, it is grinding. Okay? And he's got a decent sized fleet. I'm talking this is the ships are just the British vessels involved. This is the assault fleet. And so they have a force. It's just not big enough. It's just not what can do the job for them. They have good officers. Keyes is one of the smartest officers of his generation. I don't know, that's why he's not always correct, but he is bright, and no one's going to argue with that. He's aggressive. Honestly, you could argue that if Robrook and Keyes had been in charge from the beginning, they would have broken through. I read a paper a few years ago written by someone. Oh, who was it? It was actually one of my master's students. And it was a very convincing argument, pointing out how close they do get to getting through, and how Keyes was prepared to go back a third time, and Roebuck was really annoyed the first time that they didn't push on. And if you have those two together in command from the beginning, there is a chance you break through. And that's a really weird bit of history if it happens. Because if you consider how the other lessons of World War One have been misremembered and mismanaged, goodness knows what lessons would come from that. But it made sense. Now, using the pre-dreadnoughts for this, well, that actually makes sense. The Royal Sovereign pre-dreadnought types. But the thing is, as Robrook and Keyes both later would tell you, is they'd wish they'd had a couple of months to caulk their hulls, to basically fill up compartments that were on the outside that didn't need to be crewed with didn't need to be manned with caulk, and basically, I think they will basically turn the ships so that they have so much extra capacity to take mines and stay afloat, take mine damage and stay afloat, that they can actually carry on taking more damage. They can take the city. The city has basically nothing in it at this point. When the first couple of times when they go, Constantinople is a very, very bad scenario for Constantinople. They really don't have enough troops there. And the thing is, with the fleet turning up and bombarding the city, let's be honest, the Ottoman court, the government, and this is something which is often said, the Ottoman army turns into the Turkish army and under people like Ataturk, and they are a very professional, very good organisation, very capable armed forces. The court is, I would argue the Ottoman court is at its worst for infighting in 1914-15. It is at its lowest point, and it's not going to climb back. There is a reason the Sultanate falls as quickly as it does after the war is over, towards the end of the war. It is just, it's the armed forces have kept going, their allies have helped them going, but yeah. Yeah, you've got, basically, in this point, it's not a good situation. But, and I will say this, that doesn't happen. And the reason is, take a look at Gallipoli when you're not looking at it on a flat map. On a flat map, everything looks like close distances. I like topographical maps. I like these kinds of drawings, where I can point to you and go, look at those hills and valleys! Gallipoli turns into a nightmare. Okay? If you want to force it with ships, as I said, you needed to probably cork the ships. You need, well, basically that's where you fill up spare compartments. Basically, you should, the nicer way, when they're pushing through, they tend to put the dreadnoughts almost in a square formation. And they keep, they put all the older battleships at front, and the newer one, it gets slowly newer as you go further back, further down the line. The newest and most capable ships are actually at the rear, and you push them through. That's fine. If you're going to do that, that means you're accepting casualties, to my mind. And yes, you're going to try and clear out the mines. They try and use trawlers and various other ships to clear out the mines, and they do a fairly good job. But if you're going to do that, realistically, at least the first 2 in each line, possibly the first 3 in each line of the older battleships should have been taken into a dry dock, had all the compartments they could sealed and filled with cork, so that they would basically be as resilient to mines and as naturally have as much natural flotation as possible. So a mine goes in, you've got a wood trapped air in there, it ain't going to go anywhere. It's not going to start sinking. It's not a space which is going to fill up with water and sink. It's going to a space which is going to stay floating, stay buoyant. And you basically need to make the ships a case of, these are going to be our sacrificial ships. We're going to push them through. They're going to take severe mine damage. After the battle is over, they are going to be frigging useless for anything else, apart from maybe beaching at Constantinople and leaving there. That is going to be it. But they will go through. And the thing is, if you're using destroyers and cruisers are more useful than the older battleships, honestly. Also, and this is going to sound strange, a corked up older battleship is going to carve a wider path than a destroyer or cruiser is going to. 'Cause they're fatter. Constantinople only gets renamed to Istanbul in 1920. Yeah. Before that, it was called Byzantium. Before that, it was called... I'm trying to remember what it was called before Byzantium, but it had another name before then. It's one of those places which has had many, many names. If you go back far enough, you can find all sorts of interesting claims for it. Because it's at a good position. It's at a good nexus point, a natural crossing point, natural, place for trade. It makes sense to be there. A natural place to earn money, because you can tax the trade that goes through. Yes, there are some older armoured cruisers you can look at, but let's be honest, the British have about 90. And between the British and the British and the French, they have about 90 Royal Sovereign-style pre-dreadnought battleships to call from. They have plenty of ones to go for. So, this is the point. The British alone send 25 to this battle, to this operation. And to do, go and look at how many armoured cruisers the Royal Navy had, and how many were of reduced status thanks to their age. Yeah, there's a small problem going on there. Another reason for the Royal Navy, but we'll leave that to one side. Basically, Britain has a lot of force, and they bring it to bear on Gallipoli. But they bring it to bear in that the Navy turns up, doesn't push, then the Army turns up. By the time the Army turns up, the Ottomans have dug in, they've managed to build better positions, and this shows you, that blue line is how far the British get, initial ones. Then you've got the Anzac Cove up there, where the Anzacs are trying to get in, all this, trying to push in on this isthmus, and it's just cliffs and... Sorry. It's just not somewhere you want to go. It really isn't somewhere you want to go. It's, you know, just zooming in there to show it to you, because it's a very good map to illustrate it. Look at all those places, look at those ridges. Every ridge you take, every hill you take, there's just another one behind it. It is an absolute defender's dream. It really is. It's an absolute defender's dream. Anyway, that gets us to Shameless Book, and as we all know, the alternate history would come after Shameless Book. But this is the part where I say thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing, and supporting the channel and helping it grow. Thank you. I have to say, when I got this question first from Glynn, he might have got a rude message. Going, oh god, I'm going to have to reinvent entire Fisher's plan. He may not have got it, because I might not have, I think it was a video message, and it may or may not have gone through. And the reason I'm going to have to reinvent Fisher's plan is basically because I'm going to discuss it through. But that's something you're going to realise, is that there's a good reason why. Fisher's plan, we've already discussed, is pretty strange, silly anyway. But there are reasons why it wouldn't happen the way Fisher dreams of it. The reason it wouldn't happen the way Fisher wants to do it is because, in the nicest way... Oh, we'll talk about this as we explain why. The person who's going to end up in command of this operation is going to be Jellicoe. And I don't think I need to even put it up to a channel vote in the chat. I don't even discuss it. Do we think Jellicoe would go with Fisher's plan as it was? Anyone in this channel believe that Fisher would succeed in getting Jellicoe to go with that plan? No. Lots of no's coming through. And the thing is, do you think even Beatty would go with Admiral Fisher's plan? Anyone think Beatty would be that silly? Anyone think Beatty would be that silly? I will not butcher Navy for glory. Yeah, most people are agreeing no. Beatty would not, and I don't think Beatty would. Beatty is many things. Beatty is not and does not. You have to remember, Beatty's a glory hound. There is nothing in that operation which is going to tell him a chance of glory. There's a lot of chance of dying in the way that operation is written. So, we're going to do some questions. As I presume you had some come in. Yeah, Beatty wants to win wants to live through his glory. Calum Gasberg, what was the soft underbelly of Britain by the standards? I've answered that one. Can 420%. Little topic, but with monitors on the channel, why didn't the British and the Belgians advance along the coast? That's what the British wanted to do, and the British keep cutting plans of it, and then the French kept going, but we're getting attacked, and so the British politicians and generals keep going, okay, so we'll launch an attack which is closer to where you're being attacked to draw off the German troops. If you look at the last 100 days campaign of World War One, the last budget, you find the British exactly do that and are pushing along the coastal areas and pushing in the flat areas and are doing quite well. But it's a case of, yeah, World War One has a lot of politics going on in it, and a lot of politics is sometimes interesting. Did they have enough cork from 1961? Yes, they did. Is that all the questions that come in? I'm sure there were more earlier. Has it not got all the questions? Did it miss some questions? Or was there only those questions? It's gone queues questions now closed, open, closed, open. So it's been open since 746. And this is all the questions it claims it had. Which have basically been the ones received since 2015. Ah, I'm guessing I know why. I didn't have that up, did I? I do apologise. Ah, well. We'll take many questions on this run. Joe Fredericks, I'll answer your question before we go through. Joe Fredericks, do you think if the Free Pressures had actually bold to maintain and develop their navy, would they change anything in the Olympic campaign? Nope. Really not. There is no chance where the Ottoman Navy is ever strong enough to have started to challenge the naval powers who are coming in for it. They are not, unless they have done a massive long-term development. And even then, the trouble for them is going to be, if they've done such long-term development, how have they developed it? Probably with working with the British, because let's be honest, it's the same as Japan. In which case, the Ottoman Empire might not be on the side of the Germans in this war. Because again, if they've developed their navy enough that they are actually able to contest Gallipoli and control area, they might well be allied with the British anyway. In which case, or like Italy, they might be sort of like Italy and swap onto the British side because of the connections. And they don't need the Goeben and Breslau. So the Goeben and Breslau don't become anything but actually annoyances to them. So, yeah, it's a case of... No, it's supposed to be that one. Yeah, I doubt that's going to happen. Now... They did nicest way, they had 3 dreadnoughts on paper, they didn't actually have 3 dreadnoughts in reality. And 3 dreadnoughts, again, look at the fleets you're talking about, and look at by the time they'd have got those 3 dreadnoughts, what they'd have had. So, bonus book plug. Glynn was the person who suggested this topic. Glynn is, of course, a science fiction author, a very good one. Most recently, I seem to have spent a lot of my time talking to Glynn about House Adamant series, for various reasons. So I thought I'd do a shameless plug for Glynn's book as well. Dark Souls, what is the viability of Norway having a future carrier for protecting Arctic shipping lanes? In what universe is the Norwegian government going to fund the Norwegian Navy to the level they can operate a carrier battle group? Anyway, good book, very good topic, and well, a nice read. A nice read, definitely. So, right then, let's start off with what changes first off. You're going to have senior officers in charge. And let's be honest, Admiral Jellicoe, Commander of the Grand Fleet. You tell him you want to take the Baltic. You want to take the Baltic. He's going to look at you interestingly. He really is going to look at you interestingly. He's going to basically look at you and go, why? What do you want me to do? What is this? Because, and I mean this in the nicest way, Jellicoe has got on his team people who are former heads of naval intelligence, basically, which was the staff of the Admiralty in that period. You've got a whole sort of slew of staff officers. You've got a whole lot of senior officers as well below him. In the nicest way, he is a full admiral. The guy who commands the Gallipoli operation historically is a vice admiral. Jellicoe is the most senior officer afloat. He is the most senior officer in charge of the most senior command the British have at the time, the Grand Fleet. He is a very different senior officer than Gallipoli. If he doesn't, in a nice way, if you tell him, oh, we want you to go, but go softly, and if the army's not coming, he's going to look at you and go, I'm not going till I've got troops. Until you have got me an army here to go and attack with, I'm not doing anything. And how do you dismiss him? The war is barely started. All the pre-war hype about him, all the glory of him going out there, they've had a glorious battle already in terms of, yes, it was BT's forces versus the Germans, but it was the Battle of Dogger Bank. Everyone knows the Grand Fleet is even more illustrious, even more greatly led, all these things. You cannot get rid of him for him going, I'm not moving. I am not moving till we actually have the troops. And you can't really argue with him over it. He's also going to want to look at the plan and going to go, yeah, right, like I'm going to do that. Not the way that, I don't think he's going to do it the way that, potentially, Fisher would. Lions, sorry, would that be pre or post Jutland? This is pre-Jutland. This is going to be late 1914 discussions, early 1915. Because, as I said right at the beginning, Lions, and I'll say this to just remind everyone who's joined us as we've gone, Gallipoli's often forgotten how early it was. War begins in 28th of July 1914. You start having the Dardanelles campaign in February 1915. This is well before Jutland, which is until 1916. And, yeah. Jellicoe will probably be talking about all sorts of interesting things. But if he is absolutely being ordered, he has to go in and seize a position on the German Baltic coast. If his orders are that, I think he'll work towards it. The thing is, as I talked about earlier, there is a methodology there. It depends on destroyers like the Harwich Force. It depends on monitors. It depends on a lot of assets that the Grand Fleet has at disposal, but also depends on quite a massive fleet. And remember, Fisher wanted 600 ships. Fisher's line was you needed over 600 ships for the operation. Jellicoe's first belief for time and ability for time is going to be ship numbers, and we'll be talking about that in a second. What changes? Well, first we're looking at the force structure, and this is the force structure, not just command structure, this is the force. And yeah, I'm sorry, there is a little bit of writing there which I didn't realize how small it was going to be on the screen, so I'm going to expand it out a bit. And hold it there for a couple of seconds. And then expand it back. And yeah. This is going to be a different force structure. Because you've got a lot more senior officers involved, but you've also got a lot more other interesting people involved. You've got Tirrett, you've got Hood and his inshore squadron. You've got all that force, taking part in operations. You've got the Grand Fleet, the Assault Fleet, probably the Harwich Force. I'll be talking through the probable forces that are going to have to combine together to get it. You have got the likelihood that if this is going to go in nicest way, Jellicoe is going to be saying we're going to have to get the Russian fleet to come out as well. The Russian Baltic fleet is going to have to sortie at the same time. So there is no scenario where Jellicoe wants to launch his operation and not have the Russian fleet come out at the same time. Coordinating with them is going to be fun. Now, There is an interesting scenario where you go, well, could Ian Hamilton be in charge? Still, out of the ground forces. And I have had this conversation with people a few weeks ago. I went, would Ian Hamilton still be in charge? He certainly has the right political connections. He's certainly, that sort of level. The odds are no. But the thing is, I don't know who from the BEF they probably take. If we consider the BEF's command structure, and I'm just finding my own notes on this. Its command operations. Yeah, its order of battle and its command structure and who's in charge and what's happening going on. I think your options for senior officer to be sent to command are potentially Lomax, or because it could be Haig, but he's Lieutenant General in charge of First Corps, and initially it says John French. French is in command for a little, for quite a while. It gets Haig takes over, but Haig is First Corps. So potentially it's going to be Haig from First Corps. Potentially it's Grierson of Second Corps. And potentially it's Pulteney. I myself think it's likely that French would not want to be without First Corps. So my bet would be that the Australians and New Zealanders and the troops coming in from India, etc., would be, instead of going to Gallipoli, would be drafted in to replace probably Second Corps. Probably Second Corps. And it would be Second Corps, think about them, which should be drawn up to provide the British forces involved. And Second Corps, if we consider them, they have the 3rd Division under Hubert Hamilton. Wetherell Hamilton, I should be precise about which one is. 5th Division. So, they are a fairly good formation. Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry is in 5th Division's 14th Brigade. They've got good units. They are a fairly solid formation. Grierson, I don't know. Grierson's dead by that point, isn't he? So it'd be Dorian. It would be Dorian, probably. No, we're talking about February 1915. So it would be Dorian. Yeah. I'm gonna have to try and remember, what do I remember about Dorian? And I should have probably prepped this out, but I wasn't actually thinking much about the Army Command at this point. But when I was doing notes to this, it was live, which is my own fault. I was thinking so much about naval stuff, and then I got in here and went, hang on, I need to, when I'm live, this is why I'd like to do the recording before I do the live, because I then think of everything beforehand. But I didn't think about the Army Command, and he comes from the Sherwood Foresters. Actually, he could be a really good choice, because he's an infantryman. And he's a solid infantryman. He took part in Islandwana. He took part in various operations. He's okay. He's not going to be a startling choice, but he does fairly well in his World War I command. Apart from leading a campaign for moral purity, but we'll leave that to one side. So, yeah, probably would be a Horace Smith Dorian. And a second corps would be the ground forces involved. If the Indian Army gives a lot of the manpower, this would be known as an invasion of Germany. The Indians, it's going to sound strange. The British are likely to use the Indian Army still in the Middle East to shore up the Middle East forces and to shore up the operations against the Ottomans, more than they are to bring them to the European theatre en masse. I think it's Second Corps on Dorian is the likely one to go. I don't think Haig and First Corps. The thing is, if you have these forces involved, and you are going to need a lot of naval force involved, and there is a reason why I did forget to put the army one. Okay, so you have Second Corps, which is roughly 2 divisions. They're going to need to be reinforced. There's no way they're going to be able to do it in less than 3 division strengths. Probably 4 division strengths, because in nicest way, you're going to have to land a formation, seize an area, and secure it. Now, going to explain there's going to be a slight difference in the force structure, but we're going to get there, and why they're going to do it. Overall combined strength fleet, if we are putting together all the forces not involved in convoy work or coastal defence in the UK, i.e. the forces which are deployed on offensive operations, army support operations, fleet in being operations, or fleet or sea control operations, well, we have quite a significant naval force, and I'm not going to argue we don't, but the 600 ships which Fisher was talking about, not really viable. We can roughly generate at any point of time 30 dreadnought battleships, including 5 Queen Elizabeths. Remember, famously, historically, Queen Elizabeth herself misses the Battle of Jutland because she is off being repaired, maintained, and all these things after Gallipoli operations. Well, in this scenario, you could actually save up to have all 5. The odds are you're not going to have all the R's available and all the Queen Elizabeths available, but it's going to depend on when you launch it. And I don't see this being launched in early 1915 because you're going to need so much force procured. The British could probably put together 11 battle cruisers and battle cruisers. As we all know, the differential between the two, battle cruisers, one word, are actually built and designed the concept of fighting each other. Battle cruisers, 2 words, are basically the dreadnought armoured cruiser, given a snappier title. At least 33 pre-dreadnought battleships, that's sovereign-style vessels. There could actually be more they could get a hold of, and I did do a calculation and I found up to 50 could be used. The thing is, some of these are going to be used to support combat operations, but some of them are going to be used will be used for getting rid of minefields, as said, corked up. At least 18 armoured cruisers, some region of 42 light and protected cruisers, 140 destroyers, 20 monitors, a mine layer, 3 seaplane carriers, and that's 299 warships. That is 299 warships. Think about what I just listed. That is not a small amount of force. It's still not enough. So the question becomes, what can this force achieve with a corps? Maybe a 3-division corps, but a corps. What can this force achieve when you consider World War One's capabilities and the British capabilities in World War One? What could they do? Could they do an assault on Pomeranian? No. That's my answer to you. You would have to build up this fleet many times to be able to do Fisher's plan. So, with that all being said, and it's taken us a surprising little time to get through these first three-ish slides of this section, we get to the complicated thing. What do I think Fisher's going to do? And please note, I did work out it would be about a corps of troops, but I forgot to work out for some reason, when I was doing all the maths, scrabbling around trying to make sure I was adding up all the right ships, forgot to check up the generals, which is annoying me. If your job is to go into the Baltic and cause trouble for Germany, and put yourself in a position where the High Seas Fleet has to come out and fight you, where do you go? Where do you go becomes a question. I would say myself, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jellicoe had a similar thought, is that there are two areas of Germany which are rather close to these straits. They're close. You can take them. There it is, the island of Fehmarn. I think it's Fehmarn. Yeah, Fehmarn. And I'm trying to remember it. There is sort of basically there is an island. I'm going to expand this map up for you. Actually, no. I'm going to do better than that. I'm going to show you using Google Maps. Okay, let's go to Window View. Properties. Okay. Right then. Yay. Go away, Google Maps. Stop. Go away. Stop trying to be smart on me. So, you've got this area of the Baltic, round Bergen, Arthruggen, Puttgarden, Lom, Sassen, these things. Basically, you've got one area which can be reinforced by, and you have this area. Now, you could land with relatively small forces and take those areas. Relatively small forces, you can cut them off. The thing is, they then allow you a fairly good access to start doing a blockade of the Baltic coast and to make sure you have complete access through these straits. And that is the point. Now, you probably need both divisions to take this area. It is not massively overly populated, and again, there is these sort of bridges down here, etc. But again, taking these areas is about providing yourself with a forward base to support smaller assets, destroyers, etc., in their pursuit and operations to support your blockading. You also would use, at the same time, would use those pre-dreadnoughts, some of those Royal Sovereign starships, to go into the Kiel Canal. This lovely canal going along here. And blockade it. That is part of your mission. To blockade, preferably both ends, of the Kiel Canal. You are going to take casualties doing this, but that is why you send in your corked up pre-dreadnoughts. And the moment they get into position, someone has things set to light the cork on fire. Now the thing is, cork is annoying to get started. It burns slowly. But the joy of cork is, once you started the fire, it is very difficult to put out. Very difficult to put out. That is the joy of cork. And I would not be surprised if Jellicoe wouldn't notice this. Because going through here and then trailing this fleet along, going, I'm going to go for Pomeran and sort of land in this area. That's not really sensible. You know, you've gone a long way along for not much benefit. You're actually in modern day Poland. This way, you take places which are nice and close. This is part of Denmark, so technically you shouldn't take it. Please note I'm saying technically you shouldn't take it. But that's the scenario. And the whole point is that allows you to do a blockade of the Baltic. Now, why is that useful? Because much of World War I, the ground fleet is waiting for the high seas fleet to come out and fight. And the high seas fleet has this thing of being a fleet in being. You take those territories, you attack the Kiel Canal, the high seas fleet is going to have to come fight you. The high seas fleet is going to have to come fight. Because and to answer the question of why, if you have to go for a forts and mines extra, why not go for Wilhelmshaven and High Seas Fleet yourself? Because those are the thickest areas of forts and mines. And you're banking on the Danish not firing at you. The Danish are neutral. The Danish forts and ports are neutral. Those are technically international waterways. Technically, you have the right to go through them. And the thing is, once you've pushed in, and once you've got those areas, the High Seas Fleet, as said, has to come out and fight. It can't not. Now, the thing is that going to be an easy win? No. It's going to be an absolutely horrendous battle. But the point is, this makes sense from Jellicoe's perspective. Jellicoe would have a corps of troops at his disposal, a reinforced corps, at least 3 divisions. So, you know, that's probably it's a naval division added on to the 2 army divisions. That's probably what you're looking at. So taking those 2 areas is possible. He has enough ships at his disposal to be able to support those operations because they are close enough. He can support them with 1 fleet. He's not going to have to divide his fleet up. And it's going to make best use of the ability of the sacrificial lambs he's got. And yes, you can argue going for Wilhelmshaven. makes some more sense, and etc. on those things. But again, Wilhelmshaven is heavily defended, heavily fortified, has a large number of ships there, has a large number of capabilities. It's not a good place to go for. You establish this on the Baltic coast, you are letting loose British destroyers, you can basically, the Harwich force can move itself into the Baltic and call it the Fremen force or something like that. They can have fun, as they would consider it. And yes, they're going to take losses doing that. The Germans are also going to take losses. And as I said, again, the problem for the Germans is pre-World War One they had X budget. And if they went over it, they would be getting into a political fight with the army. And they were competing on a quantitative race with the British for capital ships. Which meant they didn't have the money to build enough cruisers, or large enough numbers of, or even large enough destroyers, torpedo boats, whatever you want to call them. Hochseebots. Doesn't matter what you call them. They ain't big enough. They aren't on average big enough or powerful enough to do what they need them to do. Now, there is also in this scenario a very real potential of the Danes joining in, because let's be honest, they still want Schleswig-Holstein back at this point. There is also potential of others joining in. Now, do I think these positions become points that that the British can expand from to invade Germany? No. And they're only points which can actually be held as long as the Royal Navy can support them. But it does mean Germany starts to be blockaded from Sweden, so they're not getting supplies through the Swedish merchant route. It does mean you have the ability to run convoys through to the Baltic ports of Russia. Not brilliant, but not bad either. It does mean the German shipyards, which are, a lot of them are along the coastline, are able to be bombarded by the Navy. It'll be taking place early-ish 1915. JP0104. So it's taking place instead of Gallipoli. It's probably not going to take place in the same timeline as Gallipoli, because Jellicoe's going to want more supplies built up, etc. So you're probably looking at, well, I said early-ish, probably about June 1915. That's also before the massive German build-up of submarines really starts to hit the water. Is this a good option? Not really. The nicest way, and I do want to stress, this is a case of, if this is the option I see Jellicoe going for, if he's got Fisher and Churchill demanding he does something. Because it is not going to be an easy scenario. It's not going to be a high likelihood of success. It's going to be 50-50, really. It's not going to be the sort of operation which Jellicoe really wants to do. Joe Fredericks, the French Atlantic Fleet is mostly in the Mediterranean by this point, so stop worrying about them. And the thing is, the Germans will have to relocate forces to watch these things. The best point you got is that it's going to tie down a lot more German soldiers defending the coast of Germany than it's ever going to cost the British forces from the Western Front and the Russians on the Eastern Front. And you have the potential the Russian Baltic fleet can actually be more supportive and more active as well. But, as said, it is going to be a battle. It is not going to be we walk in, we won, we're here. That's not going to happen. Jutland was an absolute scrimmage. This is going to be a scrimmage and a half. Admittedly, this is not going to be the scenario where you can duck out and call it a victory, like you got Jutland. This is going to be a scenario where neither can really back down. Because if the British back down, they lose massively. They can't afford to do that. And if the Germans back down, they're on their home turf. They're literally outside their home ports. They cannot afford to lose it. So it will be a dirty, nasty, horrendous fight. All the German coastal torpedo boats will be involved. Now, again, the British fleet, which I discuss in the video, which is actually now going to come out next week, are actually curiously well designed to deal with the Juno-Cole scenario. They still carry a huge number of 3-inch guns on their capital ships and a lot of their crews as well. They have a huge number of light cruisers who basically exist to destroy them, and they have a huge number of torpedo boat destroyers, which exist to destroy them. Plus, in this scenario, I wouldn't be surprised if the British take a lot of their torpedo boats with them as well. I would honestly not be surprised in this scenario if Jellicoe hasn't got every single ship that can carry a torpedo boat, taking a torpedo boat or two, taking torpedo boat, at least one, if not two torpedo boats with them. And the moment they pass through the Danish Straits into the Baltic, they will immediately drop those vessels as quickly as they can. And drop them fast. Because, yeah. I have a feeling if they can time and push on both fronts, there won't be troops to relocate immediately. That is the other thing. If they can time it with attacks on land, it's going to be a nightmare. And Joe Frederick's High Seas Fleet is going to be do or die, so it's going to be the same as Jutland. Let's be honest, at Jutland they didn't leave anything at home they could do. The Grand Fleet, less stuff at home. That's going to be the different scenario in this one. In this one, I do not see the Grand Fleet leaving anything at home. Everything which can be got out the yard and is able to be moved is going to be there. There is going to be... I don't think in this scenario Jellicoe gets away with having his standards of, can you fire as accurately as I wish, if not, you stay at home. It's going to be everything. Everything, because they're going to need it. Because you're going to lose some ships to absolutely stupid things. You're going to lose a battleship, I can almost guarantee it, you're going to lose a battleship to a wandering mine. That is a mine which has got loose from its mooring and has managed to get free. That is the odds. You're going to lose a battleship to a torpedo boat, more than likely in this scenario. So the Germans, but no one's going to care about the Germans losing a ship. They're going to use the British losing a ship as an example of why you shouldn't do this. And there are many, many reasons for why you shouldn't do this. But if done in roughly June 1915, yeah, and as seducible, if it can move and shoot and fires the British ensign, it's going. Pretty much. And the thing is, again, this will be Fisher this would be Fisher pushing it, Churchill pushing it, but Jellicoe organising it. And that is a big difference. Kolchak would probably sail out the entire Russian battlefield. Yes. The nicest way, the Russians hear this is coming, they will sail out their entire fleet. So, yes, you will have the Russians come thundering in to assist with the battle as well. For whatever benefit that does. And the thing is, it will probably be beneficial, because, let's be honest, the Germans might be able to deal with the Russian fleet, but dealing with the Russian fleet and the Royal Navy turning up, that's just not good. There isn't much of a Canadian Navy by this point in 1915 to do, but whatever's available will probably be there. And a nice way, it's mostly Canadian sailors in the Royal Navy at this point, but we'll see what happens. But the thing is, it will be as many ships as they can get, especially monitors. So everything chunked in, you take those places. It's not the plan Fisher envisaged, though. It is not. And that's the point, really. Fisher envisages a grandiose plan where you go in, you descend, and your glorious victory, the image of victory. Jellicoe is going to go for, what can I do as an operation which is going to force the High Seas Fleet to fight on my terms, the way I want to fight? And then, once I've done that, what can I then do with that battle plan? And if he can get, for him, it's not going to be about descending on Berlin, it's going to be about control of the Baltic coast. If he can get control, or effective control, i.e. not complete control, the Germans are still going to probably get ships in, blockade runners in and out occasionally and those sort of things, but effective control, i.e. like the Union blockade of the South in the American Civil War, of the Baltic coast, whilst also still controlling the North Sea, he's going to have a massive impact on the war. If he can force the Germans to have to concentrate troops to watch their coasts in case of him doing an invasion on the Baltic coast, that is going to limit the armies they can send to the east to fight the Russians. That is going to limit the armies they can send to the west to fight the British and the French. If he can manage to run convoys through to Russia from mid-1915 onwards through the Baltic, then that is going to stop Russia falling, or at least collapsing like it did historically. Because it is going to have food, it is going to have armaments, it is going to have the things it needs, because it can still access them on the world market to a position where they actually have infrastructure, they can move it about within Russia. That becomes useful. And the thing is, this all adds to Germany having a problem. So for Jellicoe, this becomes an operation where the risk is potentially worth the reward. Let's be honest, the risk is huge. The risk is huge. We're talking about all these things. But the reward is also equally huge. Because the reward, I don't think anyone would disagree, would probably shorten World War I by a good couple of years. If you keep Russia in the war fighting, if you manage to entirely encircle Germany from its supplies, if you've managed to blockade the Baltic coast but also be able to be in position to bombard their yards so they can't build submarines as freely as they did historically, that is not going to lengthen the war from the Allied perspective. Oh, the trouble is it's going to be happening after Tannenberg Forest, but Tannenberg, Tannenberg, I said Tannenberg Forest, and I've been doing a video about, well, not a video, no, another thing about the Roman loss in Germany, and so I'm conflating the two battles now. My brain is having fun. I think it's also going to be an interesting one in terms of the battle, in terms of if it happens, we'll talk this through, it's going to also be a significant diversion of forces for the British. There is going to be French annoyance that the British have taken away an experienced corps from the Western Front. That is going to cause trouble in the Allies. This is why I don't think you're going to get naval asset or naval support. The moment if it does, and we'll talk about what happens if it succeeds or fails in the next few slides, but the thing is, the likelihood is that the French will not be involved until after the operation has gone one way or the other. Lions War might actually be over Christmas, at least sooner Christmas. I doubt it'll be sooner Christmas, but there is the possibility. There is certainly the possibility that after a massive, we're talking about these battles, there is certainly a possibility that the Germans do decide to sue for peace at a certain point. But it's not going to be the plan that Fisher envisaged. That's the thing. If Fisher gets his Baltic operation, yes. Fisher is not going to get the plan he envisaged, because Jellicoe won't do that. And Fisher hasn't got the political power in this period, as much as you might believe it, he has endless political power, to get Jellicoe replaced. He's done far too good a job promoting and screaming how good and how smart and how capable Jellicoe is. Remember, by this point, he's been predicting not only World War I would happen after the battle, after the Kiel Canal was completed, but has been predicting that Jellicoe would be decisive man in charge of the British battle line at the battle that would ultimately happen, and would lead Britain to glorious victory for close to a frigating decade. He has described at many points himself as basically the Jervis to Jellicoe's Nelson. There is no scenario where Jellicoe in early 1915 has the lack of political influence and positioning to find himself being removed because he's telling Fisher, no, I won't go without the troops, and I won't go without a plan, and your idea is stupid, I'm going to refine it. Neither can Jellicoe get rid of Fisher by that way, but that's the same problem for each of them. With that being said, chance of success. It's going to be one of those things which depends on timing. Okay? Yes, those positions have some defences in them. They do, but they aren't the strongest part most strongly defended parts of the German coast. They're also not really expecting much. If you consider how Fisher, how Tritz, how Jellicoe, a lot of those officers plan, and you consider the relative amount of sources they have and experience they have operating and going through the Baltic, I wouldn't be surprised if they'd try a night operation. The idea being to go through the straits when it's dark, and be carrying out landing operations first light, if not slightly earlier. If they do that, they might well succeed. They could well get enough troops in those sparsely populated areas to achieve the control locally they need and get the troop personnel ashore. With the personnel being ashore, they then dig in. They can also be doing perhaps clearing minefields, which might be in the way of their manoeuvres, but also start at the same time bombarding various parts of the German coast. That is going to force the Germans to do something. Let's be honest. You get bombardment going on, all these things. The Germans are going to start reacting. Now, the advantage the British have over the Germans, and this is a chronic constant of World War I, is the Germans cannot do anything quietly via radio. For some reason, in World War I and World War II, the Germans do not understand the concept of turning down the power of their radios. They broadcast everything at full volume, presuming their codes are unbreakable, because that gives them the best chance of actually passing on the message, is the theory. The problem, the small infinitesimal problem for the Germans that creates is that means that the moment they start broadcasting their radios and shouting away about manoeuvring and moving and coming out to fight the British are going to know they're coming within minutes, not hours, not days. So the British are going to know they're coming. In this scenario, it's also one of the few scenarios where Jellicoe's probably going to know where they're going to be coming from. Because let's be honest, Wilhelmshaven, Kiel, exactly where they're going to come from. Jonathan Moon, you don't need to know what they're saying if you know where they're saying it. Exactly. That is the whole issue, which the Germans... Let's put it this way. There is a reason why we know all about Bletchley Park and the code crackers. Try finding out information about the signals traffic analysis work done at Bletchley Park during World War II. Actually, better yet, we all know about Room 40. Room 40 was where they were cracking the codes, right? Trying to crack the information. We all know about them. That's a brilliant part. There is another room down the corridor which is doing signals traffic analysis. The methodology used for signals traffic analysis from World War I hasn't been declassified or able to be studied yet. No, let alone the one from World War II. That tells you everything you need to know about the real value of cracking a code versus hearing where it's being broadcast. The fact is, the signals traffic analysis stuff has still not been declassified. Michael Cooch, no, actually they use the radios. You think they'd use, on land they use the telegraph system, you'd think. But they actually tend to use the radios because they tend to be outmaneuvering the telegraph system. Their telegraph system hasn't yet been laid in place, so they're often using radios to organise manoeuvres. At sea, again with their ships, even the ships which are in harbour are often getting radio broadcasts from Berlin, etc. Still, they're doing radio transmissions. It's one of the reasons why... good example, Scheer has one radio call sign when he's ashore, has a different call sign when he goes to sea. So, chances of success... The British will have taken everything with them. But the Germans are going to bring everything out to fight it. The British are going to know the Germans are coming. If they've managed to get through at night time with minimal observance, with the Germans not really getting a notice about what's going on until too late, and that might well happen. Yes, the Germans have consulates, etc. and things in Denmark, but they also... how much are they going to see of a fleet going through in the dark? How much is going to be how much is going to be believed, reported back? How quickly is that information going to approach positions? Are they going to know where they're going to go? All these things. It's going to factor against them. And as long as the Germans are deciding and trying to work stuff out and communicate and find out what's going on, the British are moving. And if the British have told the Danes, you don't need to get involved in this, but if we win the war, you get, I don't know, Schleswig-Holstein. You get that. We'll give you control of the Kiel Canal. They might the Danes might just keep quiet. And might ensure that the German embassy and consulates see nothing, hear nothing. Daniel Phillips, how scuppered does this get if Denmark either decides to just outside Germany or simulated before the war for whatever reason? It wouldn't probably happen under those circumstances, because at that point, if it's assimilated before the war, Germany would control the straits. They would have forts on either side. You'd be fighting a way through like Gallipoli. It's always fun of, if you have that what if, then you're not having this what if, because the two won't work. The two will be mutually exclusive. But the thing is, if the Germans come out and you have a big fight, it's still got the chance of failing. What is wrong with our ships today? You've still got the chance of losing horrendous losses, and if the British do lose, well, war will be over, but it won't be over in a way which the Allies are going to like. Because if the British fleet gets annihilated in this operation, if the British fleet and the Russian fleet get damaged, and yes, they are probably, by the way, there is no scenario where the British and Russian fleets get annihilated in this scenario and do not take a vast majority of the German fleet with them. That just doesn't happen. I'm sorry to say that, but the Germans are numerically smaller, and even with the additional support of mines and torpedo boats, there is no scenario where the very large fleet we're talking about, and it will be a massive fleet, gets taken out without the Germans also losing a large fleet, as a portion of their fleet as well. You know, there was the scenario where, I was looking at just a second ago. Let me open up again. Building for Jutland. The British at Jutland are quite literally packing almost a, oh good lord, that's terrifying numbers actually. Okay, so why am I using the Battle of Jutland figures from 1916? Because there's a bit of building work gone on and it's not too much time. The British have 28 dreadnought battleships to the Germans 16. The British 9 battlecruiser Jutland to the German 5. The Germans bring 99 ships to the Battle of Jutland. The British bring 150. So the British bring roughly 50% more than the Germans bring. In this scenario, the British are bringing everything. The British are bringing their pre-dreadnoughts with them. The British are bringing every single one of the destroyers they can grab hold of with them. You know, the Harwich force is going to be there. If we, again, go back to the numbers we're talking about, compared to Jutland itself, if the British have just gone with what's available in that period, and I mean, or just literally what's available in that period, they will have 140 torpedo boats, destroyers, at the battle of this battle, versus the 78 they take with them for Jutland. I wouldn't be surprised if they have closer to 160 once they work things out for this scenario. They would have twice as many destroyers at this fight than they did at Jutland. They're going to have 33 pre-dreadnought battleships, Royal Sovereign types, as I call them. And again, yes, you're probably talking about a good 12 of those being fitted up as blockade ships to go and blockade the Kiel Canal and be sunk to blockade the canal. But, you know, that's still going to be enough pre-dreadnought ships to match in with the German pre-dreadnoughts and go, hey, we're all here to play the same games. And yes, you might be qualitatively superior to me. You might. But while you're fighting me, you can't support your dreadnoughts fighting my dreadnoughts, and my dreadnoughts are qualitatively equal, definitely, to yours, and they outnumber you. Because there's probably about 30. And the Germans probably have about 16 with them. And that's the other ultimate scenario here for this one. If this battle takes place, consequences failed, it's going to be massive. The British are going to lose a huge number of ships, as said, if they lose. Because they're going to pick when they go. And they're going to pick when they go to fit when it best suits them and they have the maximum availability. So, consequently, when they lose, they're going to lose a huge number of ships. It's going to be devastating. The British Royal Navy will be annihilated. But that doesn't mean the German High Seas Fleet survives either. The scenario is the British lose landing figures, etc., and they lose then the fleet. But the German fleet probably doesn't survive either. Either way, World War I probably gets very different by sea. It probably becomes a very different fight by sea. Lions, let's put it this way. You put forward the argument of would you not sort of split forces to head to Helgoland. Again, think about this from a scenario. You're going to be facing the entirety of the German High Seas Fleet. If you split your fleet, what does that mean? The entirety of the German High Seas Fleet will run potentially into a smaller portion of your fleet and could win that battle. And that weakens you. So this is a scenario where if you don't keep your fleet concentrated together, you run a far greater risk. Because your strength, the British strength, is to keep a concentrated fist. Now, admittedly, you're going to get people going to go, oh, but I could be doing this operation, this pocket, this operation, this pocket, this operation, this pocket. And if they did, that's going to probably lead them to losing. Because if the British are spread all over the place, they can't be drawn together quickly to support each other and actually get organised for a fight. When the Germans come out, and the Germans will come out, then they can get defeated in detail. And that's the worst case scenario. It's also possible landings can't go forward with the Royal Navy. I would say the Royal Navy starts landing almost immediately as they get there. They'll start landing. They'll start offloading troops, because landing the troops is going to be forcing... For the Royal Navy, landing the troops is going to be forcing the Germans to come out and fight them. Now, the thing is, as Mike Gooch pointed out, yes, the Germans might try something in the Channel Atlantic. The German High Seas Fleet really can't reach the Atlantic. They can do the north coast of England. The Channel has the barrage. They have a load of mines and other things defending them. So, that's probably also what the British submarine force is going to be doing. The British submarine force is going to be deploying everywhere for the moment the German High Seas Fleet comes out to engage. So, expect Royal Navy submarines to be all over the place, trying to torpedo things. Now, you are quite right that the German fleet base is at Wilhelmshaven, Lions. You are quite right. And for the German High Seas Fleet, they would have to come through the Kiel Canal to attack this force. But that is a point, to an extent, for the British. And that is the only argument you have against blockading the Kiel Canal. If you blockade the Kiel Canal, the German High Seas Fleet can't come through and fight you. And you want them to come fight you. You want the High Seas Fleet to come fight you. And going for Wilhelmshaven, again, think about this. if you send enough force to fight Wilhelmshaven and to deal with the German High Seas Fleet, if it comes out en masse on High Sea for Wilhelmshaven, how much force do you have available to go into the force itself into the Baltic? Because basically, to blockade Wilhelmshaven is going to take the entire Grand Fleet, and you're going to have to go through the largest minefields Germany has. The largest, densest minefields Germany has are ones around Wilhelmshaven. So, if forcing your way through there, that's historically what holds the British back from chasing them when after Jutland, etc. They've gone through those minefields. The British can't chase them. The British don't want to chase them in those minefields. They are that thick and dense. Joe Frederick, seeing how the French Navy would be aware of how important this battle would do, I don't think so. I honestly don't. I think the French are going to be pissed off on, excuse the French, on the strategic level. The British have withdrawn from have withdrawn a corps from the battle in the Western Front, and that's going to have to be really well handled. Withdrawing a corps. Because that's going to be the big clue the British are planning anything, withdrawing a corps from the Western Front. The only argument you have against withdrawing the corps from the Western Front rather than using the forces which were coming from the Mediterranean, and actually grouping together the forces in the Mediterranean, then sailing them as quietly up into the thing, is you don't want to alert the Germans to what you're doing. So you might do that, in which case that's the scenario where Ian Hamilton ends up in charge. JP, if you blockade the canal east, and that is one reason why I was running a blockade, because if you do blockade the canal and force the German High Seas Fleet to have to go around Denmark to get to you, you are going to cause some trouble. Because there's going to be two scenarios which happen. Either their ships get caught in the canal. If you time the blockading right, you could actually catch German squadrons in the canal. And remember, you can't turn round in the Kiel Canal. You don't have space. So if you are in there and it's blockaded at the end, you're stuck and have to drive yourself back. So that is an option. If the British can blockade the Kiel Canal when the German High Seas Fleet is trying to push its way through, yes, you might go, well, the Germans can blow their way through then. Yeah, but the thing is, can they? Because if you're taking blockading ships and you're doing that, you also might pack those blockading ships with mines and all sorts of explosives and fun things. So when they're in situ, no one wants to get close to them. Joel Fredericks, if this operation is supposed to be secret, how will the Jellicoe ensure the Russians keep their silence? And Joel, I've been kind of trying to be nice, but the questions are open. You do have a Q&A. You could put the questions in properly, like people do for the end. When I get to that, but I will answer that one. But the answer to that one is quite simple. You don't tell the Russians till you've launched it. You don't tell... And this is the other thing against telling the French. You don't tell the French or anyone till you've launched it. And it's another reason to not actually withdraw the Second Corps from the Western Front and to use the Anzac troops to do it. Because then you don't have to tell your allies you're launching it until you actually do. And it's a great way of maintaining complete and utter operational control, but also silence and security. Because let's be honest, if you send a message to the Russians, which arrives at midnight as you're passing through the Danish Straits, as you're going past Copenhagen, and they get a message going, "Hello, the Royal Navy has entered the Baltic from Jellicoe. The Russian fleet will be at sea by midday. They will be at sea probably quicker than that, because the Admiral will get woken up and will go, the Royal Navy's in the Baltic. I have a chance for glory. I have a chance for victory. And will probably be charging out as fast as he can get any ship moving. It's going to be an absolute nightmare to coordinate with them, but they'll do it and probably do it. And it doesn't matter. Not having them the first few hours doesn't matter. Them coming charging in as it's ending is gonna be useful, because even if you're losing at that point, the German High Seas Fleet's probably lost enough that, frankly, yeah, they're in trouble. The Russians turn up. But consequences if it succeeds. Okay, so if it succeeds, what happens? What do you get out of it? This is the interesting one. You probably get a blockaded Baltic coast. It's going to be blockaded. The Baltic is going to be blockaded. As I said, you're going to be able to get supplies through to Russia. You're going to be able to get all this stuff moving backwards and forwards. I would say the High Seas Fleet is going to have to come fight you. They might want to launch an attack on Britain, but they'll run into submarines, they'll run into destroyers, well, probably the coastal destroyers, things like the Cricket class, etc. They'll run into the British torpedo boats that are being left behind. They'll run into the barrage. Maybe the French will move some ships up to support the channel. But realistically, the French, again, if you don't tell the French you're going to do it until you're doing it, then they can't do those things. But the Germans are probably going to be forced by the Kaiser and by the German government to try and respond to the British in the Baltic, which means the German fleet goes into the Baltic to fight them. If they lose, and the British have won, and the British have controlled Baltic, then the High Seas Fleet has probably ceased to be a functioning force. And yeah. That then becomes no High Seas Fleet. We have the British on the Baltic coast. We have a lot of minefields around Wilhelmshaven and the North Sea coast, which defend us, but the British are on the Baltic coast and can do operations from there. The French, the British are still on the Western Front. The Russians are getting resupplied on the Eastern Front. At that point, you probably get the German government suing for peace. And let's be honest, they've got a reason to claim for it. Our navy was annihilated. The army can claim they've won the war, but the navy lost the war. It's not their fault. Suddenly the stab in the back theory is all entirely about the German navy. Sorry, Kaiserlich Marine. The Tsar can... the Tsar is still looking pretty victorious and cool, but the Kaiser can go, well, I wanted to fund the navy more. You all saw I wanted to fund the navy more. I was right. I was right. Because of your not funding my beautiful navy, because of you not giving me the super battleships which I wanted, because you didn't give me the fever ships of my dreams. The fever ships of, by the way, the Kaiser's dreams make a certain American senator's dreams look absolutely childlike and small. Because of that, we have lost. It's not my fault. It's the politicians' fault. It's all the people in the Reichstag, all the people in the parliament who haven't been funding us enough. I have no idea what just happened. How the frigate... New IKB, what the frigate have you done in my chat? It's dancing! It's dancing! Okay. That's a gift, is it? Or something? I have no idea. But yeah. There are no American Navy in this fight. There is no anyone else in this fight. But the thing is, if it is won, then I wouldn't be surprised if World War I is over by the end of 1915. And that becomes a problem. Because you end up with a Germany which still sees the army as its strength and has just had its navy wrecked. And the army can claim they were victorious. We were victorious. We were winning. We, the German army, we were winning the war. It's the navy which lost. But for Britain, consequences it is the Royal Navy seen as their ultimate guarantee of security. The British Army is basically looking at the Royal Navy going, we hate you. And by the way, the Royal Navy, even if they win, will suffer horrendous losses. This will be an absolutely massively, it won't be necessarily a Pyrrhic victory, but it will be a tremendous loss. If it's viewed as ending the war, the loss will not be considered Pyrrhic. Okay? But it will still be a tremendous loss. The Royal Navy will be rebuilding itself for the next 4 or 5 years. Admiral Jellicoe gets a column. Probably Winston Churchill becomes Prime Minister instead of Lloyd George when the good old when he succeeds in instead of once he's pursued by, of course, Asquith. So when Asquith falls, and probably still Asquith still does fall in 1916 because there are many reasons Asquith falls from government. It's probably going to be end up Churchill becoming Prime Minister. Richard Curtis, I don't think so. For the British, it's a logistical nightmare. Any damage ships are likely to be ambushed on the way back to Britain. Who's going to be ambushing them? Richard Curtis, who is there to be ambushing the British ships on the way back to Britain? That's the question. It's going to be a massive loss. There are going to be loss of ships, yes. But the German Navy is going to throw everything into this fight to try and win it. There is not going to... Again, we're talking 1915. The German U-boat strength in 1915 is what... They're just starting. They don't start the German U-boat war until don't start really till May 1915, and they have what? Ooh, that's not about barely anything in terms of ship numbers. I'm looking at their U-boat numbers. Operational U-boat, their U-boat strength in 1915 is really not great. They had about 30 operational U-boats and total 50 in commission in most of 1915. This is the reality. The Germans build U-boats very quickly in terms of later in 1916 and late 1915, all these things. There is not much force around to go hunting for the Royal Navy on the way back. It's not really... A North Sea isn't a logistical nightmare for the British. Royal Falker, what's the over-under on the Warspite's continued existence in this timeline? Let's be honest, Warspite is Warspite. She is plot armor. It's like HMS New Zealand. There are certain ships in history which I will never volunteer will get sunk in a battle because they just seem to have plot armor. Let's be honest. We're talking about a ship which was potentially hit by so many as 6 torpedoes during the battle of the Battle of Narvik, the third battle which he took part, which he takes part in, and none of them go off. She gets hit by all sorts of things and survives. It's Warspite. Look at her in the Battle of Jutland herself. She does bloomin' figure of 8s then. She actually is commissioned in March 1915, so she'd be a brand new ship in this battle, but yeah. The thing is, again, you have to remember a lot of the USN order in 1916 that's based on what's been happening abroad and what they've been losing, what's been going on. If the Royal Navy doesn't have the Battle of Jutland, if this battle's happened in 1915, it may not happen. You're also probably not going to get the massive U-boat campaign that takes place later in the war. You're not going to get the American build-up of destroyer forces. You are probably not going to get the treaty system as it historically happened. Matthew Gilling, U-47 only launches in August 1915, and the boats are sequentially numbered. Yeah. Richard Cutts. The Russians. I don't think at any point did I suggest the British would be using Russian infrastructure to support operations. Basically, the British turn up for a battle, fight the battle, and then afterwards are probably limping home. But there are just not going to be a lot. There's not a lot of German submarines available to do the operation. There just isn't a lot of boats available. In a scenario, and also, again, most of the U-boats you're dealing with are not massive in terms of... I'm just looking at my notes. I have notes. Where are my German U-boat stats? U-boats. Yeah, you're dealing with... Most of these U-boats are very, very small and have only a couple of torpedoes on board, if that. U-47 is a U-43 class, which are only ordered in sort of 1913. U-47 doesn't commission till February 1916. I think by the period we're talking about, they're only up to U-44 has actually commissioned. And these boats carry 6 torpedo tubes, 4 bow, 2 stern, and they carry 8 torpedoes total. They are preceded by the U-31s, which carried 6 torpedoes total. They were preceded by, and there were only 11 of those. The U-27s, which carried 4 torpedoes, all in their tubes. They're preceded by the U-23s that also carry 4 torpedoes. No, 6 torpedoes. They carry 2 reloads for the bow torpedoes. And these torpedoes, again, one of the things, again, is that people often forget is the torpedoes in 1915 are not the torpedoes of 1916 are not the torpedoes of 1918. They really aren't up to the same level of standard as they were later on in the war. So, yeah, whilst I'm sure, and as I've said earlier, there was going to be losses to a torpedo boat, there's going to be losses to a mine, I'm sure there'll be a loss to a submarine, I'm sure they will happen. I don't see it being a massive consequence versus the losses they'll probably take in the actual battle. And the battle will be a death fight. It will be an absolute... Look, this is one of those scenarios where we're talking about losses in terms of if they failed it would be terrible on both sides. Losses if they succeed are going to be terrible on both sides. The fact is, there are going to be a huge number. We're talking engagements possibly taking place at ranges where, frankly, it doesn't matter what armor you have. It is going to be engaging at the ranges of knife fighting range. You're possibly going to have 15-inch gun battleships engaging each other at ranges of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 yards. Okay? That's not ranges where you're aiming. That's ranges where you point and shoot in the general direction. Because it's just that. And consequences if it succeeded? Well, yeah, as I said, the sheer amount of information gained would be interesting for the naval study, but you're not going to get a treaty system. I don't think you get the treaty system either way in this scenario, but the British are building a massive fleet. Fisher, the Warspite opened fire on few men are at 3,500 yards. Yes. It is often forgotten how close they got when they opened fire. There is a reason those ships are devastated as quickly as they are. But, yeah. So, yeah, they succeed. The war is over, yes, but good lord, they're all going to be building battleships. The Royal Navy is going to be politically sitting in the UK going, we won a continental war in Europe. And everyone's going to know, no, the army tied the Germans down in the west, the Russians tied them down in the east, and you just broke their back in them by hitting them in the centre. Yes, everyone's going to know that, but still, the Royal Navy is going to be sitting there going, we won, we won, we won. The Japanese are probably going to get a lead over everyone in air power because they're already the ones investing in carriers and things and actually pushing forward ahead at this point. And Joel Fredericks, as we talked about before on this channel, there was already a naval race going on with the Americans. It was a qualitative race. The Americans and the Brits were very happy with their qualitative race. And again, the British never had to worry too much about fighting a quantitative race against the Americans because Congress will shoot them in the foot long before they have to win. They have to actually worry about it. Again, if you want proof of this, there is an entire treaty system where they were supposed to be equal numbers. And the whole way through, well, what did the Congress worry about? Whether or not they had the same number of capital ships and carriers and the status of that. And they never built enough destroyers, never built enough cruisers, and the Royal Navy was never really bothered about the USN being the same number as the same size of them, because it was kind of like facing the High Seas fleet again. It was all top figures, none of the supporting acts. As said, I think this battle turns into an absolute knife fight. I'm not proposing this battle at all. In many ways, I think it's a very, very high-risk operation. If you lose, the enemy's pretty much wiped out. If you win, you're pretty much wiped out. But, yeah, I don't think there's a... I think, Richard Cutts, I don't think it's a case of it's a guaranteed loss. Because whilst there are minefields and things in the way, there is the fact that the Germans, to an extent, believe that as long as that, the British wouldn't violate Danish neutrality and come through, because that would then allow them to come through. And they're right, to an extent. They are right. And it's as the war goes on, it gets a lot thicker and a lot more problems. But again, in 1915, we're talking about. We're talking about in the first half of 1915. And sometimes people talk about that sort of the Baltic and these things. And they talk about defences established and the things, and they go, it'd be virtually impossible to do it, and they are right. But most of those defences are actually built latter part of 1916. A lot of things are developed and built after the Battle of Jutland. So, yeah, it's that sort of scenario. But let's see what the questions are. Yeah, let's see what the questions are again. Oh, in this scenario, you're probably still getting a lot of investment in battleships, but again, no treaty system, and the aircraft carriers are still coming because the British are working on pre-World War One, the Japanese are working on them. The Americans might be slower to get into the carrier race than they were historically, but we'll see what happens. It's a scenario where you probably end up with a lot more interesting developments in the 20s and 30s in terms of no treaty system. And again, less funding issues, less fights over funding because there's less worry over the debt and all these issues. But also, you have to remember, aircraft. It's going to be more interesting. It's going to be the pace of aircraft development. And again, you're probably going to see something again happen like it did historically, which is in the 20s and 30s, the nations which have the funding for it will be driving forward the development of it. But you're also going to have a different Germany in this scenario. You're going to have a Germany which is, win or lose, at this point in 1915, no one's talking about getting rid of the Kaiser. They might be banning Germany from having a navy. The British would have no qualms about banning Germany from having a navy. Ever again. Both sides get wiped out. The French Navy emerges from the war as the largest on the continent. The Italian Navy might have a conversation with you about that, Matthew. Go have a look at how big they are in 1915. Let's see what the questions are. Could the air that's available at any point in World War One, at any point, would this make this plan actually work? Air power would help in terms of providing an overview of what the people things are doing in Overwatch. I wouldn't be surprised if you see seaplane carriers involved in this operation, providing spotters, providing reconnaissance, providing some air defense, probably some interdiction of enemy aircraft, but it's going to be very limited. In 1915, it's really nowhere near where it will be in 1918, and certainly nowhere near where it is in 1945. So yeah, it's going to be different. Oh no, John Fredericks, you have to remember the Kaiser will be sensible. He won't blame his own Chancellor. He'll blame Parliament. The Chancellor is his government. Remember, he picks his Chancellor. Sangloon, what do you know and what are your thoughts on Churchill's plans to invade the Netherlands during World War One? He had many. Again, it's rather similar to this operation. It was a case of... It's not so much invade Netherlands as invade northern Belgium. It's sometimes put us invading Netherlands because it's going to come incredibly close, and frankly, you're going to have to use Dutch waters to do it, which is going to cause issues with Dutch neutrality. But basically, it's more northern Belgium and its way of going around the German lines. There's also occasionally position ideas for trying to invade the North Sea coast of Germany by going through Dutch waters. Usually invading the Netherlands itself, I think there is a plan which considered it at one point, but it was basically one of those plans which is written to say why we shouldn't do something. Again, planning is kind of like ship designs. You will quite often find plans written and designs put forward which are never going to be done, but they are written so you can show you considered it and why you're not going to do it. And to an extent, I do sometimes wonder if Fisher's Baltic plan, his invasion of Pomerania and all that stuff, is actually cover for a blockade plan. There is part of me which thinks Fisher is not that dumb. And Fisher does have a tremendously, how to put this, consistent track record of saying things which are bombastically, overwhelmingly in the sort of overwhelming bombastic, I'll put that the wrong way around, in their phraseology to draw attention and make political punch, but not intending to do that kind of operation at all. But yeah, it's a case of his plan is nuts. Ron, does Russia have any airlines capable of executing a tandem up like this? Kolchak is good. Kolchak is not stupid. And basically, in the nicest way, the Russians will know they fall into this the British will, as I said, my suspicion will be the British would tell them when they're doing it. The Russians would know they're turning up, and how do I put this politely? Kolchak would probably send a signal to Jellicoe on lines of, "My Lord Admiral, may I please join your battle? Where would you like me?" And so you get round the thing of two admirals, basically an admiral giving another one orders from another nation by literally you phrasing as, "Where would you like me and what would you like me to do?" So instead of you giving me an order, I am offering to assist you. It is something which navies have worked with a lot in that period, and there's a whole tradition in Napoleonic Wars where Russian admirals would sometimes turn up at a few battles, not just Russian, the Napoleonic Wars, but also in some of the wars that came afterwards in the 19th century, especially the ones against the Ottomans, where the Russians would turn up and go, "We, of course, do not accept any foreigners commanding us at sea." Understood. "Where would you like me, my Lord Admiral?" And it was a practice which was understood. And the British had done the same. When they turn up with a smaller force, and the Russian is therefore de facto the force commander, because they are a admiral of rank and have brought a larger force, it's, "Where would you like me, Lord Admiral?" So it's not a case of you giving me an order, because you cannot give me an order, because I am an admiral of equivalent rank from another nation. But I can ask where you would like me, and I can then do that. What would the British do with Constantinople if they had taken it? Might they have been more of an apple for the conflict of the Allies, given Russian interest there? And that's, honestly, the British probably give it in the nicest way. The easiest way for the British to shore up the Russians being involved in the war and to shore up the Tsar's position is to give him Constantinople. The other option is to offer it to the Greeks, because the Greeks will want it. The British could say, "We'll hold it in trust for you both, and it will be sorted out in the peace treaty at the end of at the end of the war." But it is a case of it'll be working what it is, and for the Russians, Constantinople, if that's taken, you cannot emphasize how big a win that would be for Tsar Nicholas. That's another thing with the thing. If you want to shore up Russia, that does. However else it will upset others. Yeah, but the odds are, if you give it to the Russians, then it's going to upset the Greeks. But frankly, let's be honest, the British aren't going to sweat the Greeks at that point. They're lovely people. The people are wonderful. The government's usually so disorganized that frankly no one sweats the country. I mean that in the nicest way, but that's the tradition of Greece in that period. The Greek people are lovely. The food is very nice. They have a wonderful history. They have a great culture. They have a government which is usually sufficiently disorganized it can barely get itself out of its own shoes. Hello, Daniel Fowler. Exactly, Rolf Anker. I'll not take orders from Foreign Navy, however, I will take suggestions. Yes. Basically, it's how you phrase it. Okay, that's how you do the combined operations at the time. We answer that one. Joel Fredericks. How much coordination do you think Jellicoe and Kolchak would do before this operation? None, because Jellicoe is not going to share it around. But Jellicoe might well have, how do I put this? Jellicoe might not share actually that this operation is coming, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jellicoe decides to start regularly corresponding with the Russian counterpart in the Baltic fleet. Suddenly the Russian counterpart in the Baltic fleet is getting letters going, "My dear Admiral, I wish to make your acquaintance, da-da-da-da-da." As we are the two sides of the German coin, perhaps we can assist each other in future operations and carry on. And you more than likely a relationship will be established. No information will be shared, no ideas of what their forthcoming operation will be. But by building a relationship, then when it happens, Kolchak will go, "Okay, I know what I need to do." There are ways of establishing this, so you establish a relationship without revealing the operation, and so when it happens, things can work together. And that is likely the route and path they'll take. No hypothetical situations, nothing. Because in nicest way, both Jellicoe and Kolchak would presume that their mail will be intercepted as a priority by enemy spies. So you do not put hypotheticals, you do not put anything in there. You are talking about families, you're talking about things like managing fleets, infrastructure issues, you're talking about all sorts of things, but you do not talk about operations, you do not talk about individual ship capabilities, you do not talk about specifics, you do not talk about anything which you do not want the enemy to know. Because correspondence between two CNCs of that higher rank and that importance is going to be priority number one for interception by the enemy. Sure, what do you think of the Salonika plan? Personally, from what I've read of the options for the second period of 914, most likely to succeed. It does have that argument with it. I'm not sure about logistics behind it, and I'm not sure about the politics behind it. In my experience, in that it's one of those operations which looks very good on paper, but actually getting anyone to support that paper is going to be very difficult. But it's got options. Polemus, well, we did spend a lot of time discussing this about, I think, myself, if you want to guarantee the Germans don't realise what you're doing, you're going to use the Anzacs for it, and the Royal Navy Division, and basically the forces which would historically have done Gallipoli. If you want to use the best troops you can, you're going to withdraw Second Corps from the Western Front, but that's going to give the tip off to Germans that you're going to be doing something. Matthew Keeling, much can be communicated without saying if you get the wording and timing correct. Jellicoe and Kolchak will be well versed in that art. Yes, they would be, but so are going to be the people who are going to be dissecting their documents. But yes, if you establish enough of a correspondence, there is a potential for them to be able to communicate without communicating. Basically, there could be a way for for Jellicoe to give Kolchak a tip-off that, something might be happening soon. So keep your boilers furnished. There'll probably be a discussion about how are you keeping your boiler? How are you keeping the readiness of your fleet to sea? We've really upped our readiness recently to keep our ships, boilers going, keep them ready to go to sea at a moment's notice, because it's necessary for the to deal with the German operations and our own operational needs or something like that. Yeah, but as I said, you'd only replace Second Corps if you would have to replace Second Corps with the Anzacs. So basically, Anzacs would be taking over the Canadians, Anzacs, and the other British troops which would have went to Gallipoli would take over the gap from Second Corps. So you would have to filter them in to take the place of Second Corps and then withdraw Second Corps, which would take longer and be more difficult than realistically using others. But there again, if you use Second Corps, you're using far more, how do I put this politely, battle-hardened troops because they've been fighting for the last few months. So it's 6 of one, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, isn't it? It's basically a case of, if I do it, then it's going to be more complicated, but I'm going to have better troops which are battle-hardened, which is going to be far more of a threat when I put them on the German coast, and far more likely to succeed. If I don't do it, then the Germans are less likely to see this coming, which makes it also more likely to succeed as an operational strategic level. So, yeah. It's fun. Fisher, if they wipe out the High Seas Fleet, why not clear German mines and break the flank of the Western Front with the Ground Fleet? They probably will do over time, but you have to remember, after this one, the Ground Fleet's going to be building up for a while. Yes, the R-class battleships are going to be coming into service, and, you know, the British are going to have new battleships and new things coming into service, and Lord help them, they're probably going to be building a lot. But it's going to take time to rebuild your force structure after this. If you fail and use Second Corps, the French are, well, that's a mess. Yeah, that's a trouble as well. Second Corps is rather useful. It's going to be it'll be an interesting debate. It's a scenario time for it. Fisher 96. Why didn't they go for 25 knot fast battleships from Major General onwards instead of battleships and battlecruisers? Because you're dealing with the power density problem. Okay. So to build a ship which has enough of a honeycomb structure to have all the armor coverage that they're building for battleships at the time, as well as have sufficient density and subdivision, you don't have the space to have all the engines unless you're making it very expensive, and boilers you need especially, to get yourself up to 25 knots. It's going to be a much bigger ship than you're prepared to build. And you also remember, so basically, at the time we're talking about, metallurgy, hull design, and engines are all developing. And this is one of the reasons why what would be a battle cruiser in one period, especially a later period, would probably qualify if you weren't looking at armor coverage, you're just looking at purely at armor thickness on the principal armor, and subdivision, you'd be looking at potentially could qualify as a battleship. If HMS Tiger is a good example of this. I often use it and go, look, if you're making the case that Hood's a fast battleship, you have to go back and make HMS Tiger a fast battleship. Because she's actually got better subdivision and better armor coverage than Hood. When you look at her on the size and density. The trouble is she's not this big, flashy 15-inch gun ship, but she is 28 knots, she is equivalently armed with the battleships of her time, all these things. But she's definitely always considered a battlecruiser. No one ever makes the case that Tiger is a fast battleship. And that's because she is a battlecruiser, which means Hood probably is a battlecruiser. You know, it's the way they are. And Hood actually started out, the original Admiral design is Fisher-inspired, closer to an Invincible class than a Tiger. In realistic terms, it's not till you get to the G3s that you're really carrying on from the Tiger design philosophy. But the point is, if you want it sufficiently armed and armoured, with the bigger guns, etc., all these things, you constantly are in a scenario of playing off one against the other. Of, do I go for speed? Do I go for armour? Do I go for firepower? And a battleship usually sits at the centre of all three, so it has as much of a balance of speed, armour, and firepower as possibility. And then slowly you're building out towards speed. So you're prepared to accept slightly less armour coverage, usually when talking about a fast battleship, rather than armour thickness, and you move slightly more towards speed. Battlecruiser, again, less armour coverage, less subdivision than a battleship, and you're moving even more towards speed. Battlecruiser, 2 words. You have gone to cruiser level subdivision. You have gone to cruiser level armor coverage. To move to even more towards speed. So, you want to keep firepower and speed, but this is your armor. And as you want to maintain firepower and speed, you basically have to go away from armor to balance the 2 in the same hull. Or similar hull, unless you want to spend a lot of money. And there is the whole scenario of, I joke about this, but if the Queen Elizabeth class were built with triple turrets, they'd probably be 28-knot ships. Why? Because to maintain the length to beam ratio with the increased beam of having a triple gun turret, especially a triple 15, or even a triple 16.5, which is what they get on the Maximals, you end up with enough space for enough boilers in that hull that you are getting your 28 knots, even on traditional boilers, let alone small tube boilers. And again, if you're in a scenario where you're going for triple turrets, you're probably going for small tube boilers as well, because then the British have abandoned completely their idea of making only 3 changes between classes. 9681. So has history proved Fisher right about Jellicoe? He was certainly the best of the available admirals at the time, and certainly the coolest and calmest customer. Geoffrey, wouldn't risking this much of the British Navy require a lot of influence over the cabinet, which would be the opinion of the PM on this? Yes and no. Yes, the British cabinet would be involved. But if you've got Fisher, Churchill pulling that way, Jellicoe has a plan, and you think you can end the war, let's be honest, they do Gallipoli. The chances Asquith goes with it, because Asquith has a personality which sort of goes with people. And if you've got Asquith going along, and potentially Lloyd George as well supporting it, because Lloyd George tends to like things which look like they're going to shorten the war, the odds are you have the cabinet support. It's going to be high risk, but high reward. And again, they get to end the war pretty much solo. Britain becomes the undisputed victor of the war. They will have defeated Germany. They will have defeated everyone at this point. They will have saved Russia. For them, it's going to be ego boosting all round. Answered that one earlier in the video. Basically, if Denmark decide to side Germany or assimilated with before the war, then this isn't an option. Mark Harness, forget the Entente for a moment. The biggest argument against the Baltic plan is as long as the Royal Navy is intact, Britain will not lose. Yeah, that is the biggest argument against it. But the trouble is, we've gone entirely into this war because of the Entente, so we're not going to get out of it without remembering it and without thinking about it the whole time. Fisher, if HMS Iron Duke is sunk, does HMS Warspite become the replacement flagship for the new Grand Fleet? No, Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth is fitted out as a flagship. She's fitted out quite early on as a flagship. She's fitted out as a flagship for Gallipoli. And honestly, would potentially have been Jellicoe. If Iron Duke is lost, then he's going to Queen Elizabeth. Warspite is also fitted out later on to become a flagship, so she's a second option in the 15-inch gun ships. And the other fifth of the Queen Elizabeth, which is fitted out for that scenario, is Barham. So you would have the option. The probability is Barham's usually the flagship of 5th Battle Squadron. Warspite's the backup. So probably you would have. Yeah, it's likely. Well, you know, in a nice way, if Iron Duke sunk, Jellicoe is probably gets on board the first ship he can get his little behind aboard. It would be good if that was one of the 5th Battle Squadron, but the odds are it's not going to be one of the 5th Battle Squadron, because the odds are they're going to be at the front of the battle line. He's in the center of the battle line. It's probably going to be whoever's the nearest ship he can grab, which probably means that if it's in the center of the battle line, usually he is with Sturdy. Usually he's in Sturdy's squadron. So probably HMS Canada, probably. Honestly, it's probably Canada. Because Royal Oak is lovely, but that's at the front of the division, and if you're trying to get off the ship, you're not going to get off it fast enough. Superb's the flagship of Duff, who's in charge of 3rd Division. Yeah, the odds are it's going to be Canada. Oh, Canada. Yeah. And Bembo, which is the one behind it, is Sturdy's flagship. So, yeah, it's probably going to be Canada. So probably he would end up running the battle from HMS Canada. If Iron Duke is lost. Well, that's the thing. It's only a model. Yeah. But it is a scenario of, when you're looking at the squadron, you can sort of work out where people end up. And I'd like to point out, Jellicoe has a habit of surviving. Look at how many times he's injured and survives in his history, in his career. He is, again, he's kind of like Warspite in that regard. How many of those also be pre-dreadnoughts? Oh, good lord, that'd be terrifying. The loss of the pre-dreadnoughts, they'd be horrendous. It would just be mad. In a nice way, it's going to be indiscriminate, close-range killing of each other on many points. Does Warspite get preserved as timeline? Who knows? Potentially. A nice way. The thing is, if it was HMS Canada, which he ends up commanding the battle from, and he actually survives, and therefore that's his flagship for victory, Lord help the Canadian government every time they want to cut funding to the Canadian Navy. And Mark Harness, HM4 is super. Well, the dunking with the water helped, yes. Yeah, he is. Yeah, Jellicoe is fun with his survival instincts. I don't want to say there wouldn't be a single pre-dreadnought left. You have to remember, technically, there's also Lord Nelson and Agamemnon included in those numbers of those ships, so they are interesting scenarios. Yeah. Lance, could we actually see capital ships ramming each other in this situation? Potentially. Again, nice one. As I keep emphasizing, it is going to be an absolutely bitter, nasty, short-range fight it's going to degenerate into, if the High Seas Fleet gets that. If they manage to blockade the eastern end of the Kiel Canal with some of the High Seas Fleet trapped in there, then that's just going to cause a nightmare. And if the British have managed to lock down enough of the Baltic and take out the forces there, and then they've withdrawn the Grand Fleet from their area after securing it, and the High Seas Fleet can't do anything. The worst case scenario for the Germans is if the British lock down the Kiel Canal as they're in there so they can't get through, destroy the forces there and then withdraw, and the German High Seas Fleet has done nothing, apart from sit behind their minefields. And the British have got this area which is now secured by pre-dreadnoughts and troops on those beaches blockading the Baltic, and the Grand Fleet is sitting back in Scotland going, hello, we never had to fight you. But I don't see you actually managing to blockade the Kiel Canal. I see the German fleet probably coming screaming out of the Kiel Canal, and that's going to be the scenario. The High Seas Fleet is going to come screaming out of Kiel as fast and as hard as they can. They're probably going to be forming up as quickly as they can. There's probably going to be Scheer and his squadron almost at the front, screaming away and shouting and charging. Because if they don't attack with everything they've got, they've surrendered the Baltic without a fight. And if that happens, yeah. Oh, Jellicoe would definitely get a dukedom. So would probably Beatty in this scenario. They'd both be given ducal titles. No, Joe Fredericks, in this battle, there is no scenario where Beatty replaces Jellicoe. We've talked about this before. In this battle, the fleet's second in command is not Beatty by any stretch of the imagination. Second in command of Grand Fleet is Vice Admiral Sir Cecil Burney, who outranks Beatty, and I think even Vice Admiral Sir Charles Madden outranks Beatty at this point. Yeah. I don't think there is a single... I think there are at least 5 different officers in the Grand Fleet at this point who all outrank Beatty. I know a whole load of them have to be moved for Beatty to become commander of the Grand Fleet when he does. Matthew Gillen, there is a scenario where they are caught just getting out of the Kiel Canal and they haven't organised it, or worse, the suit engaged within the canal. Either is super one-sided. Yeah, but that only really works if the British have got their fire control being directed by aircraft. It really doesn't work because you can't really see. If you look at the map, if I bring up the map again, and we go into Kiel. Am I going into Kiel? Yeah, there's Kiel. If you go into Kiel, think about this scenario. They come out here. They come out the canal here. And you cannot really... Yeah. You know, thank you, Ferry. You can't really see in from any ranges you're likely to be there. Thank you, Ferry, for allowing me to walk around on you. Not sure who put this ferry here, but thank you. As we get closer and closer into Kiel, it's going to be a smudge on. Basically, you'd be firing at smokestacks if you don't have fire control provided by aircraft. Thank you, thank you, Ferry. That's very kind of you, Ferry. Or rather, Andreas Nevadis, who added this in April 2025. Thank you. Again, it's... if this battle happens, would the Admiral class be fast battleships, or they'd be probably closer to fast battleships? They really would probably be closer to fast battleships than anything else. Because it's going to be produced... The design is going to come after this battle, and it's basically going to be... Okay! What are we going to do? What's going to come? Do you think they'll... What do you think will be the big takeaway from the most famous fight? Probably that, you don't want to get to decisive combat ranges, which the British are preparing for. Probably speed and maneuverability, because maneuverability is going to matter more for ships in the scenario than anything, and long range engagement might be... It's going to depend. If they use aircraft and they do a long range bombardment of the Kiel Canal as people are trying to come out, yeah, it's going to be a nightmare for them. And then that's probably going to push for long-range engagement. If it's a short-range, nasty, combined arms fight, then you're probably going to see people looking at balanced fleets with far more emphasis. There's not going to be so many people thinking about, oh, what do we do? So what happens to Canada in this scenario? Well, in this scenario, potentially she still gets given to Chile. Potentially she doesn't. Potentially in this scenario she actually gets sold to Canada, and they use her as some sort of memorial of their World War I service. Joe Fredericks, if the free patches were more competent, i.e. never screw up skirmishes, and they're generally better than anything, how does it change World War I? It gives the Ottomans a fighting chance of actually avoiding being in World War I if they're actually competent. Because, in a nice way, we talk about Italy not being really prepared for World War II. The Ottoman Empire was in no way prepared for World War I, and going for strict neutrality was their best option. And realistically, they should have pushed that route, because strict neutrality would have been helpful to them. So, how does the Motley Crew respond to this operation handle the Soviet Union? It doesn't exist. Okay, you might still have the Menshevik Revolution in Russia. It's probably going to be slightly later. But you probably potentially still have the Menshevik Revolution. You don't get a Bolshevik Revolution. There is a potential for a middle-class Menshevik-style revolution. There is not much. In this scenario, there's very little chance of the Bolshevik Revolution, because also the Russian army is not hollowed out. The loyal regiments stand. And that means the loyal regiments are still going to be alive, and, in the nicest way, the Navy's victoriously been part of this battle... This glorious battle, and we've won the war. The Tsar can ride on that for a good few years. It's going to raise the loss of the Russo-Japanese War. Joe Frederick, even if the Germans face no rail restriction, do you think the Kaiser would just do a High Seas Fleet 2.0? Would he focus more on his cruise escort subs? There's no scenario I see of him getting out this without facing naval restrictions, which is going to upset him dramatically, but we'll leave that to one side. But even then, he might try for 2.0, but I don't think he's going to get the force for 2.0, because it's going to be a question of people in Germany going, can we actually challenge the British? So I think he probably goes for cruisers and subs. He probably tries a advanced version of Junacol. And that being said, goodness gracious me, we've been going for roughly 3 hours. Hope you enjoyed tonight's video. Hope you enjoyed tonight's discussion. Sorry again about the army commanders. I do not know why that slipped my brain to think of to remember the army commanders and the corps commanders. I really apologise. There's been a reason the videos haven't been able to go live. I've just been dealing with some weirdness from the house. We ended up, as I said, with a carriage door which preferred itself to be a lawn ornament. It was very nice. The people who fitted it, I have to admit, came back, worked out the problem, basically, the garage door was chosen and was put up there, was made perfect sense on paper, didn't fit the scenario actually once it's actually there. And so now we've gone with the internal door. It's the same style door. It's actually, we've gone with a roller door form. Always nice to think about, a roller door structure, rather than a thing which goes up, a solid door which goes up or sort of breaks in two. We've gone with a roller one, which goes up like that, and it's an automatic roller, and it's now fitted differently, and it's fine. Well, the problem with the bathroom is going to be solved by actually putting in a new bathroom. By the way, this is the shower room which I talked about a few months ago. We've only just had it finished, and it wasn't really fitting the needs, but it was an issue. It's now got to be replaced. And so that's going to be something I'm going to have to work out. I don't know how I'm going to deal with that one. I'm probably going to have to also go back to the old company and go, hang on, can you give us some money back, please? Because you put this all in and now it's falling apart. We'll see. And, yeah, just been having a fun time. It's been a really, really fun time. Oh, and the heating system also decided to come on full blast. If anyone has any knowledge of how to, how do I put this politely? Reconfigure Hive so it actually works, please send notes. I would love to know. If, however, your advice is nuke it and get something else, not currently an option, but something I will be looking at long term, so recommendations for different options for it. Yeah. I do love it when people do that. Oh, I don't know. It's been a fun time. Don't install it. Yeah, that would be my advice. Hive so far has been the most annoyingly neurotic system to deal with in my life. And I'm talking this as someone who is not as a historian. As I said on this channel, I worked my way through my bachelor's as an IT technician. I fixed computers for a university. I was an IT technician, systems and hardware. Not network, systems and hardware. And I have dealt with all sorts of annoying finicky systems in my time, including 3 different versions of Ghost software, which were frankly each equally more annoying than the other. And I still believe Hive is designed to drive you insane. And yeah, it just turns into we are boiling hot at the moment, and it turned on full blast in the middle of the night and took me basically powering down the system to reset it. It was fun. Full bathroom placement, that sucks. It is. It is because, let's be honest, the full bathroom replacement, it already cost us because we fitted in the shower room, which was supposed to be the shower room for my mum. So it's full. It was supposed to be a full accessible shower room, basically a wet room. They didn't quite do that, and I wasn't here when they were doing some of the bits, and that has caused issues because things were let through. Now to get it fitted up to what it probably should be, what it should have been for the beginning, and get it replaced, is probably going to cost the same amount again as it cost to install it. Which is a big chunk of budget. So I've got to work out where that's going to come from. And I just sit there and go, yeah, 2 years in this house and 2 years doing building work, and we still, by the way, please note, when I'm doing the Historiathon, as usual, there will be the phrase of, if you want me to watch a certain video, which I'm not gonna name, it'll be, the sum is the amount of money it cost me to stick in my bathroom upstairs. Okay? Because with me keep fixing the stuff downstairs in the main part of the house, there is no chance of me getting this anytime in the next couple of years. I'm not saying it, Jonathan Moon. I am not saying the name of that movie. Well, that's the list. Anyway. I will do Lions. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Hope you enjoyed. I will be on Discord in a bit to chat away if people want to. The next week will not only be the British pre-World War I destroyers, but will also be the pre-World War I destroyers will become on the Tuesday, and the French destroyers of World War I will come on the Wednesday. And yeah, there'll also be, I think, the HMS Walker video on Saturday. Thank you. Let's see. I will look at it. No. I said I will only watch that particular movie. Runan. I will only watch it, and Knight and Jonathan. I will only watch those movies if, I mean this importantly, I'm saying this wrongly, if there's enough money raised for me to get my bathroom. If not, it's going to be me cash flowing it when I earn enough money. Oh well. Anyway, take care. Toodles, everyone. Thank you for being here, and see you, anyone who wants to sign up and chat on Discord in a bit. Toodles. Thank you. Hey, Rita. You were raiding me? I'm sorry, I'm just going. Just literally finished. It was a fun one. But I'm sorry, I'm literally just finishing. Oh. Just finishing. Take care. I was actually considering raiding you. It's the way it happens sometimes. Take care, everyone, and hope you're all fun. I was just checking to see who was actually live for me to raid. No, I'm not still going. I'm going to be on Discord, chatting away with people in a bit. I'm just leaving, but take care, Rita. Sorry. I was just looking for who to raid. Toodles. I apologise, no one is on who Rita's going as well, so no one's on, so I will say good luck, everyone, have a nice evening, and sorry, can't